So here we are again for the afternoon session. We will start with the paper presented by Maria Tassalopoulou and Panayotis Tourinikiotis. Excuse me for the pronunciation, but you know, well, the world is different and it's very good that is different. So now I just go to share my screen. Here we are. Okay. And this is the video.
Hello, it's Maria Tassalopoulou from the School of Architecture at the National Technical University of Athens. And together with Professor Panayotis Tourinikiotis, we studied the case of Leros at Greece. Today I'm going to present you the changing identity of Porto Lago at Leros, and I want to thank the scientific committee for organizing this very interesting conference and for letting us the opportunity to present our work. Well, the rise of the military regimes during the 20th century Europe acted in favor of the technological advances in the state's growth, while their policy affected both city centers and rural areas. The idea of a brand new city as a stratified expression of ideology was common among modernist architects and urban planners and was varied as examples of different political agendas. Such an example of an area that served as a control point for the Italian fascist regime during the first half of the 20th century is the island of Leros. Leros' turbulent past is in a way linked to its constant occupation of foreign military forces, but at the same time, it is the military forces to which the island owes its modern structure and development. In this presentation, we trace the island's history and structure the changing identities of Porto Lago, the settlement that the Italians built during their occupation as follows. Firstly, the Porto Lago military settlement, 1934 to 1943. The installation of the Italian military regime has changed the image and the growth of Leros, which up until the 20th century was in between the Ottomans and the influence of the Orthodox Church. During the 1920s, the Italians were developing across the Mediterranean and established control points in Tunisia, Libya, and in Greece. Leros occupied an important area as far as the main sea routes of the Eastern Mediterranean are concerned, as serving the trade between the ports of Egypt, mainland Greece, and Anatolia. Italy was annexed the deep natural port of Laki, which means lake, and established an iron naval base in Lepida, near Laki, thus forming a military operations center. The port of the lake, Porto Lago, created the new Italian place name and was structured as a model village that was bearing the image and the symbolic power of Mussolini's vision. Porto Lago is a particular case of settlement made up mainly of and for military personnel. The clear lines in both the urban layout and the buildings reflect the regime's image and status. Modernism is mixed with futurism and the Mediterranean rationale, producing a modern settlement of Italian rationalism. Both urban blocks and the buildings are following the general design principles in a way that each infrastructure to be part of a wider geometric composition smoothed by curved lines. The construction of the new roads, the extremely detailed urban plan of the new settlement, the large public spaces, and the military building infrastructure undoubtedly changed the inner regional balances and led to an overall development of the island. The advent of modernity affected the change of mentality and led to an unprecedented growth in both the settlement and the whole island. Secondly, the transition from Porto Lago to Laki from 1947 to 1973. After the annexation of the Dodecanese to Greece, Leros tried to overcome its military identity. The Italian large building infrastructure acted as a catalyst in undertaking uses involving the mass population. As such, the military warehouses served as a
si vede la tua mail
for the education of the orphan children at the Greek Civil War that broke out after the World War II. It is a period that the remote island of Leros acts as the backyard of the unwanted uses for the mainland Greece. From 1958 to 1981, the island is gradually converted into an asylum with 4,000 people with mental health problems and severe mental deprivation to be transported to Leros. Nevertheless, the jobs created by the above structures have as a result the island to maintain its population even in periods of great migration to other islands and in mainland Greece. Studies show that nearly 60% of the island's workforce worked in hospitals, with Leros having one of the highest GDP rates compared to the rest of Greece and zero unemployment. The conditions of the detention and care of the mentally ill by untrained land workers occupied the international media and branded the island of Leros as a depository of the mentally ill. The 2010 European refugee crisis also affected the island. Its close proximity to the Turkish coastline led to an influx of migratory flows. The Greek government decided to form a refugee hotspot camp in the ruined structures of the Italian aeronaval base in 2015, hosting up to 860 people, which is still in use. A new camp close to the Italian facilities in Lepida is currently under construction, which can accommodate up to 2,000 people. Finally, Porto Lago as a historic site. In October 2020, the Greek Ministry of Culture decided to declare the settlements of Laki and Lepida as historic sites. The architecture of the settlement is now protected by Greek law, and the restoration and reuse of the modern architectural heritage of Leros is currently under discussion. The declaration opens up a new chapter in the history of Leros. The Ministry of Culture documents the declaration as a unique complex of interwar buildings in Greece with special architectural and morphological features of Italian rationalism. Furthermore, the island's modern architectural heritage in the great area of Laki, remarkable buildings of the late 19th to early 20th century are also preserved and are linked to the historical, social, economic, cultural, and architectural evolution of the island. As such, its architectural heritage, now a listed property, can bridge the often conflicting identities of Leros during the centuries and through a careful restoration to hold new uses capable of promoting a new period of growth. We presented the changing identities of Porto Lago with a view of better understanding the historical footprint of the former military sites and of supporting its upcoming period of potential growth. The island of Leros is rich in historical layers, most of which are quite unknown or not under discussion due to internal and external factors that are difficult to bring into public debate. Nevertheless, the research concludes that if properly managed, Leros could indeed support growth prospects. The Italian occupation during the interwar period led to an unprecedented development of the island, but after the withdrawal of the military troops, Porto Lago was considered as a foreign ghost city to the locals. As such, the Italian infrastructure never really received uses associated with the local community, leading to their decline. Modernity is still recognizable on the island, with abundant but relatively well-maintained building infrastructure being the comparative advantage of Leros. The colonial identity of Porto Lago is linked to the military building infrastructure. Their great scale was also a key characteristic of not being familiarizing from the declining population of the small island. The large and empty building stock eventually hosted uses that the most developed communities of mainland Greece did not want or were difficult enough of being integrated into. Leros became the deposit of the unwanted uses, thus leading to the island's introversion and bad reputation up to this day. The declaration of Laki and Lepida as historic sites is an opportunity of appropriating the heritage of Leros for both the locals and the rest of Greece.
Cosa succede?
The remarkable advantage of hosting a unique modern settlement in a rather good condition needs to be further searched and documented thus leading to new branches of research and opening up possible academic international cooperation, thus promoting the better knowledge of the historical
Non si vede più il video.
More than that,
non si vede più il video?
No.
Ah, io lo vedo. Adesso non so.
Ma è un video o è una presentazione?
È un video.
Ah, è un video questo?
Sì, 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 adesso si vede?
Si vede un ulivo?
Sì, esatto.
Ma è fermo.
we recommended modular restoration of this remarkable model
Sì.
would eventually support growth prospects such as the culture and architectural tourism. Lero's military past and distant location in the Southeast Aegean, characteristics that during the early 20th century was considered as great advantages, moved the course of events towards its marginalization. Nearly a century after the Italian occupation, it's time to fill the missing gaps in the island's history, define the key points that represent its historical continuity and Greek roots, and finally take advantage of the unique architectural heritage and the great building infrastructure. In the current status of the digital environment, the remote island of Leros has the potential to overcome the past unsuccessful planning strategies and build up a new image supported by resilient planning and its very characteristic, the spirit of modernity. Thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, so here was the presentation about our Greek colleagues. Now we are going towards East and specifically in Tehran, Iran, with the two contributions. Nevertheless, we have just received one of them, specifically the one called the Urban Regeneration Capacity Identification of Former Military Sites of 06 Barak in Tehran. So I'm going to show you the presentation. No, let's see. No, this is not the video, excuse me. Here. Here there is the video. Now I hope you can see it.
Tehran.
Greeting everyone. I'm here as the representative of the authors for the article under the title of The Urban Regeneration Capacity Identification of the Former Military Site of 06 Barracks in Tehran. It is based on the design proposed by Urban Renewal Organization of Tehran with an approach to livable and innovative public wealth. To begin with, at present, the metropolis of Tehran is facing different challenges like population growth, urban sprawl that leads to more traffic congestion, air pollution, declining quality of life, and the like, lack of greenery and open spaces, social issues, and a variety of unused and abandoned lands and brownfields with different essence that intensify these problems. But they have also huge potential for redevelopment to tackle these mentioned problems. As you can see in these two pictures, urban sprawl was the key challenge in the last few decades in Tehran. And also, it is important to note that among different kinds of brownfields, military brownfields occupy near 12% of the urban areas in Tehran. You can also check the overall area that is considered as brownfield and in efficient realm on the map of Tehran. You can see them in brown color. In terms of theoretical literature regarding the revitalization of military brownfields, few studies have been carried out, but it is a fact that due to changes in the policies and definition of warfare and defense, military occupancies like ammunition factories, barracks, and naval air stations are considered incompatible with the nature of urban function and have no alternative except living and being transferred to the outside of city limits. The remaining lands bring about different opportunities in terms of economy, society, and environment. And what is especially important about these kinds of brownfields is their cultural values. Before presenting our idea, we studied similar redevelopment projects in military sites to specify the best scope and approach for our design and vision, like Chelsea Barracks, which is a resilient home to versatile occupancies like affordable residential units, public sport space, medical center, neighborhood centers, commercial corridors, and playgrounds. For Duke of York Barracks, which saved its identity by trying to be resilient to changes and compatible with the modern life requirements. There's also the admirable project of Fortemavera and its well-known Marco system, which is based on the cooperation and participation. Then we have the Mamura Barracks in Turin, which is transformed into a multifunctional education-based project. And finally, there is Palermo Proto Submarine Base, an inspiring project that keeps its distinct regional landscape to showcase the beauties and mysteries of a Navy base. Then, by reviewing the theoretical literature and practical background, we defined a conceptual framework for urban regeneration of former military sites, which can be categorized into two stages of process and product. The process stage, in terms of economy, it can lead to providing a new job opportunities and creation of local business. In terms of social features, it may result in social inclusion, equality, and enhancing collaboration and participation. Then, in terms of implementation, it can guide us toward a sustainable and flexible approach which is feasible and resilient, and provide us with a successful cultural heritage management. The productive stage, in terms of land use, it can help us to have mixed and multifunctional uses and promoting cultural tourism. In terms of physical features, it leads to preservation of areas' former identity, linkage of these isolated urban elements to adjacent neighborhoods, walkable and inclusive areas, and conserving the environment and physical characteristics of the place. And finally, in terms of quality of public realm, it may result in livability, calm, safe, and high security area. So in our case study, we introduces 06 Barracks of Tehran. It is located on the northeast of Tehran and it approximately covers 50 hectares. That 35 hectares of it is dedicated to public activities. The opening of these barracks dates back to Adrar era, and generally speaking, it was involved in different legal processes till 2009. And finally, according to an agreement between Tehran municipality and the Iranian army, the 35 hectares of this surrounded impermeable and large-scale realm was allocated to become a public park. Thus, the specified different goals of transferring 06 military center to a public park were all to address the challenges that were mentioned at the opening of the presentation, like adding former military land to public open spaces, to address lack of greenery and urban sprawl, for revitalizing urban context physically, socially, and economically, to address declining quality of life and social issues. We also tended to be committed to inner city redevelopment, to provide enough land and preventing horizontal expansion. We also tried to meet the spatial development needs of the former military area in accordance with the existing needs of the community, and finally we tried to harmonize the form and function of a military center with new activities to create spaces with compatible occupancies and activities. Then we applied a cultural led regeneration scenario, we define entrances and pedestrian-oriented routes on the basis of the location of metro stations and bus stops and existing passages. We also used existing buildings and allocate them to knowledge-based activities like libraries, bookstores, and military museums. You can see different measures that have been applied. In the urban regeneration plan for the 06 barracks of Japan here in this picture, you can find the location of entrances and existing rules, and also you can see two main squares here and here that are dedicated to public events and festivals. The cultural artistic field here between two main squares. The area that is dedicated to tourism recreation here in green color, and also two service administrative field here and here, and you can find different characteristics that have been added to this place. At the end, I think it should be mentioned that this design proposal hasn't been implemented yet, but I believe it was worth discussing with a group of professionals like you, and I'm so grateful for your attention. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Here it ends this presentation, and now we are going to Anna Peric and Milutin Milius. Are you here, Milutin?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so please, you can start your presentation.
Okay, just a moment to open another share screen.
Yeah, it's in the middle.
Is it?
Yeah, where you can see the 5 hour, 48 minutes, 12 seconds, the recording point, the recording red point.
Just a second, because it says, okay. I don't see anything, but okay. Oh, okay, now I see. So, yeah, with our paper, Anna and I assume that deliberative planning as a synthesis of collaborative rationality and reflective planning supported by instrumental rationality proves a proper approach to reuse former military areas in transitional Serbia. One of our case studies in Serbia is the reuse of the Army Club in Vršac, and where we explored the role of non-government organization NALED, NALED, that facilitated the interaction among various national bodies, ministries, local authorities, and local entrepreneurs in both planning and implementation phases. For this examination, moderator is actually a key. Generally speaking, deliberation is a tendency towards transcending the classical democratic voting procedure is aimed at achieving agreement about the problematic issues acceptable to all participants in the process. Because of it, the regeneration of military brownfields demands the active participation of numerous stakeholders far beyond involving the private sector with support of local public authorities. In general, deliberation has 5 characteristics. I will just mention the last one, where each member recognizes and respects other members' deliberative capacity, but also other opinions. So in accordance with it, we'll just make a little comparison or maybe emphasize group deliberation as a nowadays a method for making the decision in planning, where moderator is actually key, and moderator is one who is leading, and that is a person who is not entitled to participate in decision-making process, but has a high moderation and mediation skills. This person or organization is supervisor who monitors the decision-making process and encourage participants to participate equally and express their opinion. The moderator gathers information from the decision-making process and assures the legitimacy of the decision. Here is just a little table just to compare about what debate, dialogue, and deliberation, where we see that deliberation actually is a process where everyone in a process are learning, everyone are trying together to make some common ground, and everyone actually evaluate their own or opinions of other members in the decision-making process. If we look what is the problem in planning process from this point of view, we understand that planning is not just making a physical product, but also has to elucidate various aspects like consensus building, redefining the roles of participants and their relationships, as well as the achievement of stakeholders' equality and institutional transparency. Considering the above-mentioned aspects and their interrelation strongly affected the communicative turn in both planning theory and practice. If we focus now on just a second, is it turning? Okay. So if we focus now on our case study, military brownfield sites in Serbia in general, with previous in mind, Serbia seems as a valuable case for exploration. Firstly, the recent transformation of Serbian army system seen is in abolishing the obligatory military services results in thousands of hectares of empty or highly underused military sites, now ready to change the status of land ownership from state, public to private sector or private property. Secondly, once underpinned by public participation as the main instrument used in spatial planning practice, contemporary proto-democratic Serbian society is hardly preserved as a desirable context for pursuing collaboration in planning. So, cast broadly, under the circumstances where politicians misuse the power or create alliances with private investors, planners cannot adapt to this possibility to technical expertise towards managing the needs of the open market, lacking the support from the civil sector also. So this procedure is actually in Serbia made in two steps. One is where we are just shifting transfer rights on use from military property from Ministry of Defense to local municipality, where procedure is very strict, very defined. We know who are stakeholders or who are participants and what they are doing in this process. Second step is actually planning the reuse of military brownfields, and is not very defined because it's actually one side where public sector is one who is leading process, and in most cases is one who is making decision. Okay, so our case study, Army Club in Vršac, this conversion is done in 4 steps, but I will just say what is the planning characteristic of this conversion. It's flexible decision-making process, 2-stage decision-making process, and pronounced process of informing participants in pre-deliberative period. So if we focus on moderator, go back to moderator, and moderator that we, in our case, is NALED organization, we see from this short view on first step that we recognize 3 phases of deliberation: pre-deliberative, deliberative, post-deliberative period, where organization try to involve all different type of stakeholders who can be affected with this planning of location, organize workshops, trainings to all participants involving expertise and so on. Then organize this deliberatory process, discussing, making thoughts and discussions. And later on, when process is done, decision making is made. They are organizing business plan, how it will be adapted and proceed implemented in further life. So if we are talking what is the importance of moderator or this organization in process of conversion, we can say that first of all is they initiated the entire development process. They try to avoid one-sided perspective, what is very important in process of decision making, to make this articulation between different interest individuals, groups, confronting different opinions, and focusing all time to be very objective way, and of course at the end to insist to improvement of that preliminary business plan, what is actually made in pre-deliberative period. If we are want to see what is the guidelines, what would be guidelines for the implementation decision-making process according to deliberative principles, there are many of them, but we emphasize just on 4, that we have to define who is moderator in decision-making. Decision-making process during government planning should be organized systematically according to the type and severity of the problem. Decision-making process is best if it is two-staged, and head of the plan development process should be should not be the holder of decision-making process. So it has to be independent. Recommendation for defining the role of neutral moderator is what moderator should do is to assess and assure the participants of all those who could in some way be affected by the new decision, provide a way for stakeholders to commit to informing and learning about the problem, provide a type of transparent procedures based on aspects, elements, and public deliberation, and motivates participants to reach consensus and strive for the common interests. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, thank you so much. And now it's the turn of Maria de Graça Moreira. Please, Maria, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Hello. How can I share my...
You can share your screen where there is the red button just in the middle of your screen. If you go with your mouse, yeah, okay. You're here.
I hope it works.
It will. We can see your screen.
Because I have my PowerPoint open. Should I close it?
No. You can share your. You can go through your PowerPoint slides.
Okay, but are you seeing my PowerPoint?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because I only see a red.
You only see us.
Okay. I think now it's okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So my presentation, well, I come from the Faculty of Architecture from the University of Lisbon, and my presentation is about the situation that has been existing in Lisbon according with the military installations. So the military installations cover a very different set of functions, from barracks themselves to hospitals to administrative or support services, with very different locations in the city. After World War II, military activities changed significantly, the number of troops losing importance and increasing technically more sophisticated activities. The old buildings were no longer suitable. At least in Portugal, but I think around Europe, during the 19th century, there was a process of violent secularization, which led to the abrupt closure of many convents and monasteries. These buildings show great versatility of occupation due to their dimension, architectural characteristics, and location.
Excuse me, Maria, but we can't see your slides, just the first page of your presentation.
So let me see what's going on.
Yeah.
Why not? And now?
No.
No.
We just see the first page.
What have I done? What I didn't done to change it? Can you put the presentation and I talk on it?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe it's better.
Now I'm going to find the presentation.
Sorry, I don't know why it don't open.
No worries. Laura, Cristina. Oh, then I don't find your presentation. I don't know.
Well,
now here it is. Now, okay. Excuse me. It is okay. Everything is fine now. I will share my screen. So please, just a moment. Here we are. Okay, so now you can see, I think, the presentation.
Okay, I was there. Okay.
Okay. So I think you have just introduced your
yes,
argument.
I have made the introduction, and I was in the next slide, the reuse of buildings.
Okay.
Okay. So those buildings show the great versatility of occupation due to their dimension, architectural characteristics, and location. Many were reused by the armed force, sometimes with major adaptation works. Currently, many old buildings, convents, used by military are being vacant. So here is a little bit of the Portuguese context. We had a colonial war till 1974, and at that time we had 243,000 military people. In 1991, women are accepted at the military services. The compulsory military service exists till 2004, and at that time we had around 80,000 military. So after that, when the compulsory military service finished, we have a decrease of the people being in the armed forces, and now we need to create an area for redevelopment of the buildings. It was not very easy, and in 2017 it was developed a program called Revive to promote and streamline the process of rehabilitation and enhancements of public, civil and military heritage. It was a joint initiative of the Ministry of Economy, Culture and Finance. The Revive program involves the recovery of public properties of high patrimonial value that are not being used by communities and tourists through private investments with a touristic vocation like hotels, restaurants, cultural activities, or other forms of entertainment and commerce, preserving the values and assumption that determined the ownership of these goods and their public ownership, but finding mechanisms that allow the pursuit of the goals of rehabilitation and enhancements of the heritage. Now, I go to present some the most important cases that exist in Lisbon of redevelopment of these old buildings. You can see we have one in the east part of the city, more or less in the periphery, and most of them are in the inner city, and some of them are in the historic center of Lisbon. These locations are connected with the reuse they have done of the monasteries that exists previously. So the first case in Lisbon of changing functions of old military areas is that the General War Material Warehouse that was disabled in 93.
Microfono, per favore. Chi si è collegato al microfono acceso?
Si sente una voce, chiudere il microfono.
Please shut it down. And Maria, you can go on. Excuse me for
thank you. So in 1989, it was taken decision to hold the World Exhibition of Lisbon called Expo 98, and the land of this material warehouse were included in the area. This military area was created by order of the king in the beginning of 17th century, when the farm of Beirolas was purchased, which at the time was too far from the city to install the regiment's barracks, therefore the defense of the city with gunpowder warehouses. The second example is called the military garage. It had a process of urban renewal with the complete demolition of the building and was replaced by what is now Picoas Plaza. It's a housing and commercial complex which followed a detailed plan. So those two examples were special kind of military areas. Now we will see military hospitals. In this case, the military hospital of Estrela that was found in 1624, and in 1836 the hospital was permanently installed in the former Colégio Nossa Senhora da Estrela, which had belonging to the order of São Bento and gradually expanding to the city fence convent of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Currently, the facilities were adapted to a continued care unit managed by Misericordia of Lisbon. So we can see the kind of building that it's obviously an old monastery. Another example is the hospital called Hospital of Belém. It was a military hospital specialized in contagious infectious diseases. The activity of this hospital began in January 1890. It was installed in the monastery of Nossa Senhora da Boa Hora in Belém, owned by the order Agostinhos Descalços, and it was one of few convents in Lisbon founded after the earthquake of 1755. It was reactivated between March 2020 and April 2021 into a military support center for COVID-19. So it was vacant, but suddenly when COVID came first time, they reopened it to support the Lisbon services. The other example is the military maintenance, manutenção militar, that was created in 1857, being installed in a former convento das Agostinhas in Lisbon. Its origins went back from 1772, when the state was assigned the responsibility for the military supply. The convent was founded in 1660. In 2016, the City Council invited the startup Lisboa Business Incubator to design the concept and model and ensure the coordination of the Creative Hub project of Beato that is now in development. It's not finished yet. The other example is the Navy Hospital. This was opened in 1806 and remained in operation till 2012. The hospital was built in the site of the former Colégio São Francisco Xavier, known as Hospício dos Jesuítas and Paradise. This building was sold in the real market to a French investor that is now developing, and we can see in this image the building construction of a new hotel and condominium. The last example is the Graça Barracks, which with the extinction of the religious orders in 1834 was occupied by the army and classified as national monument since 1910. It was founded as a convent in the 13th century by the order of Agostinhos Hermits, having been rebuilt in 16th century and restored after the earthquake. The property was granted concession in 2019 under the Revive program that I previously explained, for a period of 50 years for the installation of a 5-star hotel with 120 rooms, and works should be completed in 2022. Obviously, with the problems with COVID, all of it is a little bit late, but is going on. So in conclusion, military installations are undergoing a major transformation, and old buildings often do not match the current needs of a more professionalized organization. From the cases analyzed, it appears that military installations that were installed in former monasteries have undergone rehabilitation process that require large investments and have a major impact on the city. However, as there are many buildings in degradation and with touristic potential, the Revive program was created, which will support the rehabilitation of many buildings with a military characteristics. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Maria. And here we pass through the discussion. If anyone has questions, doubts, who wants to ask any clarification to our authors, are more than welcome. No one is so keen to do this. So, well, I would like to start with Milutin, as you are the only two presenters in this first session of the afternoon. Do you find any deliberative process which are similar to the one you studied, not just in your country, but abroad?
Yeah, I mean, this deliberation approach is definitely used in Switzerland, Netherlands. Netherlands and Switzerland probably mostly use it. Some Norway in a way is overcoming it, because I'm right now in Norway, so I'm a little bit informed of deliberation, how they function, and it's just a kind of level up. So yeah, it's more and more.
Yeah, it's a Nordic approach that is quite different than ours from the Southern Europe, I would say. And yeah, it's quite good to know, and that this kind of approach is being settled over there. Mm-hmm. And to Maria, what about the public consultation with Lisbon citizens about all these projects, mostly regarding the profit-driven approach applied to some of the former military sites? What do you think? And thank you for having explained the whole panorama and what is happening in the city of Lisbon, which is very useful.
Yeah, I think Lisbon is a little bit a particular situation, because the most interesting buildings were really heritage. So they had been used by military, but they are not built by them. So, and that's why they are such in the city center. What is very important for the quality of life of these areas, and the impact that these military buildings, the functions they used to have, is very important in the surrounding. because as it was not exactly a military service, but it's a support to military, they had a lot of people living around and working around, and that makes really interesting to study and to understand that all this rehabilitation will anyway change really the economic importance of these buildings in the city.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for the explanation. So let's see, maybe Celia Clark has a question. Were the Lisbon properties sold at commercial values? So she's asking if the former military sites were sold at commercial values, at real estate values.
Well, the only one that was really sold, it was the Navy Hospital, and well, we never know exactly what was the real value, because it was a business between the central government and the private. And the development of this business was in a period that Portugal had a serious financial problem. So I'm not so sure that the real value was paid, but at last it was a good money for the country.
Yeah.
So it's not, well, it's life.
And yeah, that's it. And it is sometimes maybe crazy find out that these properties are sold, but without knowing how much money they have been sold. And Milutin, and please tell me if I pronounce it well, because
that's okay.
Just well, yeah, yesterday they called me Federico, so okay. So and what about the conversion of other sites in Serbia? What can you give us just a glance of how it is the redevelopment process is going on in Serbia?
I mean, the cases exist, definitely some industrial objects, all in all, but it's just a little bit problem and span with the regulations and law, what is in Serbia, I mean, what is actually in Serbia, but during the time it's a little bit changed, and really we see some movement, but not enough. It has to be a little bit more involvement, and it's still missing real approach of a moderator, because everything is still on the side of public sector, and public sector is one who is initiate, and you know that public sector is not independent or neutral. They also always look a little bit slightly on their own interests. I mean, industrial objects are definitely properties are much easier to convert or reuse than military sites. As I said about military sites, all procedure is very defined, and we know where are stakeholders, and especially because of this complexity with the who is owner and who is using, because property is ownership of country and the state of Serbia, but right on use is on military of defense, and then military defense says, okay, we don't need the allocation and we want to sell it, and then there is another actor engaged by a state and has to make a mark or how much, what is the value of it, and then Minister of Defense says, that's not enough, we are not happy with the price. You don't have this kind of things in industrial sites, because someone is owner and one is just delegate what is the price and calculate it on another way. But also on another side, so industrial sometimes here, or maybe, I don't know, some kind of pollution, another problem what military sites doesn't have usually.
Yeah, exactly. So Klaus Kanthman would have talked about this problem, but I just read his presentation. So well, if there is no more questions, for our guests, we will go through other.
I am here too, if someone wants to ask about Lerus.
Ah, okay, you're here. Excuse me, Maria Tassolopoulou. So, I didn't see you, excuse me, because
Okay,
people are asking me to enter, to go out. Well, if someone wants to ask something to Maria about this, the case of Portolago, a former Italian colony, which I didn't know the existence of Italian colony in Portolago. Other places in Greece, yes, but my fault. I need to study more.
It's a big one. It's another big one.
Yeah. Celias, the refugees are not in the barracks for you, Maria.
There is a refugee hotspot camp in the military infrastructure in Lepidan near Portolago. There's a gulf near the city of Portolago, and the government holds a refugee hotspot camp there. But after the declaration of the sites as historic sites, there is a new one hotspot that is under construction, and they're going to be transported there right now.
Yeah, and we find also some similarities about, well, in Italy, some barracks have been used to host refugees. We saw also that in Lisbon, a former hospital was partially reused as COVID-19 center, and also in Italy it is happening. So we can see little by little some common characters that maybe we don't know each other, but I know that each country would need a special session, maybe an afternoon, a morning, or an entire day to explain better what's going on. And what about the Italian historic memory there in Portolago? Can you tell us something more?
I can tell you that it is a great, because I visited Portolago about 2 months ago. That is a great settlement under the architecture of Italian rationalism, and it's very well maintained. They do not have any users right now because their status of ownership is quite complicated. But they're really a great modern architectural heritage. And now they are under the state's or the municipality hands, let's say, to make something about them. And about the memory, could you please specify more?
Well, no, it's just they built heritage memory, but you have already explained it in your presentation. Well, it's an heritage to discover, I would say, also for Italians that do not maybe know this. So it's almost 3:30 p.m. and we are going to skip to another session. Thank you so much to both Maria and our Tehran guests that are not with us, but it was really interesting what they say. Also, cheers to Anna Peric, and we are going to let's see, Celia has a refugees as also in terms of barracks in Berlin. Thank you, Celia, for the information. We didn't know that. I don't know that. Simona Bravaglieri, are you here, Simona?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so you can go ahead and share your screen, and we are going to listen to your presentation about the physical legacy of the Cold War in Italy.
Okay, yes, I'm trying to
it is in the middle where there is the red point with 6
yeah,
hours.
the problem is that I don't have the right authorization. So maybe you could to share my screen. Yeah, you can. Yeah, I made some changes, but yeah, it's okay.
Okay, Simona. Now I'm going to put your presentation.
Lei?
Yes, I have it. One moment.
Ma lei è giovane o sembra giovane?
Sì, sono giovane.
Ah,
Eccola. One moment. Because here
bene,
it's like
un po'
a
di nuove
bunker.
leve.
It's like a bunker in my home today. I'm ready to anything that would maybe happen here. So here there is your presentation.
Okay.
Okay.
So I will read my presentation because so in this way I can stay in time. But you can of course interrupt me. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Simona Bravaglieri. Today I will present part of my doctoral research at Politecnico di Milano, which explores the decommissioned military sites and artifacts built during the Cold War in Italy. The aims are the identification and knowledge of the displaced military complexes built between 1947 and 1989 by mapping them and describing the architectural, technological and functional features of selected sites. The buildings and sites object of the study, especially the ones connected with the missiles and communications, are part of a peculiar system for the Cold War, which have become obsolete after a few years of uses and have been decommissioned in some cases even before the end of the Cold War. The analysis of the buildings highlights the strict connection between military strategy, architecture and technology they had to host, which used to create a concise cycle of use, after which the sites become obsolete. This process is well exemplified by the sites hosting, for instance, Jupiter missiles in Puglia and cruise missiles in Comiso. That is a twin site to one site presented by Luke Bennett. The peculiarity of these systems is that once the technology changed, the site was considered unusable, and in most cases, the solution was to abandon them. This situation opens an interesting reflection now on how to preserve, reuse, and at least notify these material testimonies, which used to contain the most dangerous weapons at the time. So, no, I don't have the slide, but okay. I try to also create a periodization of the different type of use, and I'm trying to do it in the context of transnational research that is made, that was started by Schofield, Cockcroft, and Dobranovskaya between United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union. And I'm trying to also use the same categories also for the Italian case. In fact, yes, okay, so if you can go in the previous slide.
Okay.
Yes, I try to schematize the process of the decommissioning, which become more complex in case of management of the land by military forces that were not Italian forces, for instance, NATO forces and also the United States forces. The presence of the military in the perception of a place could last more than its tangible liberation. Also because of bureaucratical reasons, the space is left with lack of protection, use, knowledge, or interest. Despite this, sometimes the military has an interest in preserving the sites and usually helps the heritage institutions with personal involvement. In parallel, diverse actors start the process which regain the control over the places. When I started my research, I felt like very few people seemed to care about Cold War heritage in Italy. From certain perspectives, the situation is still so, but I could record several local initiatives made by the institutions and communities. The common feature of these initiatives in Italy is that they do not involve any kind of safeguarding from the Italian legislation. what do we want to preserve? What do we want to achieve conserving Cold War heritage? We are looking at the point of view of preserving these complexes in order to present the history of the Cold War to future generations, maybe. But also the use of the sites are very important. New functions which involve the local communities could help in neutralizing a space which has represented a controversial history, adding new values to the space. The negative image of one place should be recognized and approached by all the positive images that contemporary use and exchange between generations can bring. But whose heritage is this? Reusing these buildings is a way of responding to the needs of communities, active local involvement, and focusing on local resources. You can go on with the presentation.
Please tell me when I can
Thank you.
pass through the slides. No worries.
So, yeah, this is okay. The case I'm presenting today is the case of a Nike missile site in Bovolone in Veneto region. In parallel to the nuclear deterrence, considered very important in the first part of the Cold War, the air defense was the main weapon developed to the defense purpose. The organization of the air defense during the First Cold War was achieved by a combination of NATO, Italian Air Force, and Italian Army. So I'm talking about Nike missile sites that together with Oak missile sites form the surface-to-air missile restricted area. You can see the area in the map. And it's the northeastern area, the area that was the closest to the Warsaw Pact. The force in charge of Nike Hercules missile sites was called Prima Aerobrigata Intercettori Teleguidati and was formed by a command in Padova and 3 groups, as showed in the map. The system, after many changing and resizing, was officially decommissioned in 2006, even if already from 1988 was not used. After the decommissioning of the surface-to-air Nike missile system officially happened in 2006 to 2007, several military areas with the function to operate it became disused and obsolescent. Several were decommissioned in 2007 and 2008, but some of them were decommissioned later, as you can see in the table. You can go on, please. There are some images of a decommissioned site. This is the site in Zelo, and as you can see, it was transformed in a photovoltaic park. The next slide show the site of Bovolone, which is now in the hands of the municipality, and the municipality decided to use it to use one of the building, like the total amount of buildings is 30, and just one is used at the moment. But also between 2019 and 2021, the road surface of the path that runs along the external fence were reconstructed for a sport association that is using it for cycling training. So the external part is used and just one building is being restored. So this is a case, maybe you can show the other slides quickly, because there are some images of this site. So it's a good thing that is used at least a part of it. So the maintenance of also the vegetation is carried out, but also the buildings are abandoned. And this is the case of most of the Cold War sites. If they are not abandoned, if they are reused, they just a small part of the sites are reused. And I think this is very common for other military sites. But yes, this was my presentation. Maybe you can show the other pictures. very quickly.
Okay.
And thank you for the attention. And of course, I'm open for any question.
Okay. Thank you so much for your very interesting presentation, Simona. And now I will give the word to Veneta Zlatinova Pavlova. Veneta, are you here?
Yes, I'm here and I will try to share my presentation.
Okay, thank you so much.
C'è rumore.
There is a sound on the ground, like
Non so se è lei o qualcun altro.
or some other a rotor, like a fan.
And I don't. Is it from me? Do you think?
We don't know.
Well, I will check. Sorry.
Now we didn't hear.
Is it okay now?
Yes. Yes. Yes, it's okay. No.
Do you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Oh, great.
Yes, yes.
Oh, great. Thank you for inviting me here. I will just add a little more sketches to this global picture of regeneration of military plots. Here in Bulgaria, we face similar problems, but I will put them on the aspect of integration of the development of these plots into the overall city development. Of course, here we face the process of demilitarization since 1990s, but in South and in East Europe, this process goes parallel to the changes, the radical changes in the socio-economic and, of course, political context. So the 90s were the time where all these urban systems and all these aspects of life went under general reconstructions. This applies to the army and to the cities and to the urban development too. I will just outline a few facts about the development of military plots in the next slides. We have the three periods that are generally described as decades, but the dates are not that bounding. We have now a period when the development of the army and of the urban planning context are rather predictable. So this is the right time to adjust the two processes and to go into the integration of the utilization of former military plots into the urban development. An important fact is that these plots have unique and very good properties for the city.
Sorry, you are still, I still see the first slide and not
Yes.
completely.
Yes, we are going to the next one. Am I too slow?
Sorry.
We're going to the next slide. The cities are recognizing the opportunities that these plots provide because cities and city authorities lack.
No, ma è bloccato, è sempre la prima.
Yes, it is only
always
the first. Is the first one?
I have changed 3 slides. Do you see the changes?
No,
here is the first one.
We didn't have the possibility.
Yes.
So,
the second.
Okay.
Is
this better?
Ma deve mettere a schermo intero.
Yes. You should put a full screen your presentation.
Is it better? I have changed the slide. Do you see it?
Yeah, now we can see the slide. Yes, just just a suggestion that if you can put the full screen for the presentation, we can have a better look into it.
Well, I'm in full screen now. I don't know what's happening.
So maybe it's you know, this online
just
procedures.
try to do it once again. Okay, and now sharing it once again. Do you see now the slides?
Yes, it's just before, but you can go on. We can.
Okay, we will not lose more time. So here is. Do you see now the 4 pictures?
No, we are just in the second slide. Now, yes, it's the third one. Thank you.
Slide.
Okay. Now it's better.
Yes, third slide.
Here are a few examples of utilization of the military plots. They are just outlining 2 of the trends that cities actually adopt in their development plans. The one is transferring the plots into parks, urban parks with free access, and the other one is the construction of large and contemporary sports halls and sports infrastructure. Okay, now I have changed the plots. I have set a few research questions, but maybe we will go next to the methodology as I used. I actually set the triangle of planning as a basis of this research of the 2 case studies, and the case studies are examined through the 3 main elements of the planning system. These are the object, the context, and the process. Of course, with the introduction of the project that often changes during time. So, in a historical approach, in a historical study of the process of changing the military plots, we have very complex developments sometimes. Can you see the first case study here?
No, you can go down, please. We didn't see any. We just see the 4 images of conversion military sites in Bulgaria.
Sorry.
Yes, now it's Sofia.
Here is the methodology.
Yeah.
And here is the Sofia example. You see the data about the project here. I will just outline a few elements of the process. The first thing is that this has previously been the headquarters of the Air Force, which is a very significant place for the development of army. Now the buildings that have some elements of heritage but are not listed as such are emptied and are not used by the military. So the plots is undergone a few changes. This picture is quite old now. Almost half of this area is built up with high rises. The interesting fact about this case study is that it is located on a very strategic location for the urban development of the city, and such a large plot is very rare or even impossible to have for development. So in late 2008, an open international competition was announced. I have added 1 slide because I know architects are interested in star architects. So here are the entries of this competition that ended with announcing the winner. But following the changes in the context, I mean, we had a new government, and of course the changes in the economic context. I mean, the crisis in 2008 that hit Bulgaria a year later. This project and the results of this competition were dismissed. So another thing happened here. A year later, a new vision was announced, and the plots is now developed as a tech park with a lot of tech facilities, research facilities, laboratories, and now the third phase of the development is the attraction of the private investors. This phase was developed in 2017. Here you can see some of the project prescriptions, and here in this small picture, sorry for the small picture, you see that about 1/4 of the area is for high rises, I mean offices, with only 30% of the ground floor area related to tech companies. This project was subject of the development of the real estate market, just like the other one. Here is the case study of Plovdiv, another very large area, but it underwent quite a different process for its development, mainly because the leading figure here was the municipality rather than the state, like it was in the previous example. Here, the interesting thing is that a private development actually was the trigger for the development of the entire area, and we have a rare occasion of a municipality in Bulgaria acting as an entrepreneur. I think one of the previous presenters in one of the previous panels showed a similar example when the municipality develops the land, builds the infrastructure, and then sells the plots to private developers, thus having minimum of investment with opportunity for getting revenue, and low effort by the staff of the municipality. This is maybe the most important thing here, the comparison of the two processes. The light color, the lighter blue, is the color where private parties are leading the process, and the dark color is when state or municipal body is leading the process. You see that the two processes are quite different, but what I wanted to outline at last is the impact of the process on the other parts of the city have been mainly led by private companies. We see it here both in Sofia and in Plovdiv. And a few words at last, because the time is flying very fast. First thing is that the context is very important because it defines actually the process. It defines that often the processes are very high dependent on the state of the real estate market, and of course to the availability of funding, as the two cases clearly demonstrate. And also we have this important thing that the land ownership.
1 minute.
Yeah, thank you. That the land ownership is also a crucial factor on defining the future development of the plots, because when we have the state ownership in the first example and the municipal ownership in the second example, we have a very different visions and very different approaches because of the different availability of funds and resources that the two owners have. I think it was everything. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Veneta. And now we are going to let's speak Igor Kuvac. Are you here, Igor? No. And Veneta, please, maybe can you close the volume, your volume, because I think that this rotor is yours. Maybe I don't know how, but it.
Do you think it's my side of my computer? Is it possible?
I really don't know, but it seems as before you try to switch. Yes. Okay, now it's okay. Igor, nothing. Igor isn't here because I didn't see him before. No, I don't think so. Well, I didn't have any notice of news from him. So we can, I can share the presentation of Kristina Perkov and Tiomir Jukic. Let's see here if also I say it good. Let's see here, Kristina.
Good day, everyone.
Now I share my screen. Here we are. Okay. And this is the video.
Dobar dan svima. My name is Kristina Perkov, and today I will present you a part of the research of the topic military brownfield. That has been a theme of my interest for the past more than 10 years. And research is done under the guidance of Professor Tihomir Jukic, and a case study is military barracks sites within the city of Šibenik. In this short presentation, I will show you an overview of the states of abandoned or former military barrack sites in Šibenik, transformation processes, and interrelationship of planning activities and reuse of military barrack sites. The aim is to illustrate recognize importance of the spatial placement of military brownfield spaces within the city of Šibenik and its relationship to the intensity of transformation. Key topics included in this presentation are military heritage and the identity of the city of Šibenik, military barrack sites within the Šibenik, and transformation and integration processes, and development and social potential of those sites. Something about the identity of the Šibenik. Changes in the identity of Šibenik can be traced through several stages of transformation. From the medieval city, the oldest indigenous town of the eastern Adriatic coast, the city, as gastronomy is mentioned for the first time in the 11th century, through the industrial phase started in the second half of the 19th century, when the city experienced a significant urban development, what brought that in the 20th century, Šibenik became the center of metallurgical processing industry in Croatian old Yugoslavia. And today, the most important activity is tourism. Šibenik is a city with a rich military heritage, and because of its position in the urban fabric, military buildings and sites have been a factor in its uneven spatial development for years. Studying the history of the city, it is possible to state that the military character of the city was one of the dominant factors in the urban and spatial development. We can see here city walls, fortresses, and location of military sites. This picture still can be seen from the preserved historical layers of the city until the newest time, like city fortresses, and they have been intensively restored and transformed for the past 10 years in tourism, cultural, and other purposes. And because of all those processes, tourism in the last decades is showing an exponential growth. I want to talk about all military heritage, like city fortresses. The survey includes 10 former military barrack sites and their wider contact space. And one of the most significant obstacles to transformation of those sites is lack of adequate location data and objectivity in assessing their development potential. As the basic of planning activities, adequate spatial analysis and identification of the possibility of integrating military brownfield sites into the urban fabric are crucial for sustainable reconstruction process. Photos taken here of those 10 sites are taken in 2012, and and some buildings no longer exist. The research approach was based on mapping and field research in order to determine spatial characteristics like surface area or building coverage ratio, and something very important from this research was position of military barrack sites in the urban settings. You can see here those 10 sites and their spatial placement in the urban city fabric. The research approach was also based on spatial planning documentation analysis in order to determine spatially recognize different approaches on transformation and integration of military barrack sites. And here I will tell something more about Colina. And Colina is the only former military barrack site in the city that has been completely transformed. In 2012, the first 5-star hotel in the area of Šibenik was built on that location. And although the city plans other purposes in the former military sites, Colina indicates that the city's priority were placed on tourism-related projects. And on this slide, we can see Colina and all the changes through the spatial planning documentation analysis and through spatial transformation analysis. In the context of city development, strategic determination are largely focused on the tourism development. And modern cities are also in demand to form a social and ecological sustainable city, which among other things result in greater control over the expansion of urban space, which creates additional pressure of already tourist-laden cities like Šibenik. And many Europeans and world cities often counter efforts to exploit the existing city buildings and spaces and structures, and we can see that processes are placed here in Šibenik. And Šibenik already have significant experience with the revitalization of brownfield areas. As I mentioned earlier, Šibenik is a city with rich military heritage, and military barrack sites have been, because of its position in the urban fabric, a factor in its uneven spatial development for years. And we can see, especially through spatial planning documentation analysis, that they give also a great spatial and development potential of the city and can enable a better quality of life for their citizens. Thank you all for your attention.
Okay, so this was the presentation of Christina. And now, please, Celia Clark, are you here? Celia? No.
Could you show my slides for me?
Yeah, sure, Celia. Here I am. Let's see, Celia, the presentation.
Can you show the slides?
Yeah, sure. I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm just now I'm share my screen. Gabriel, por favor, vale, hecho. Muchísimas gracias. Here I am. Just a moment, Celia, and here we are. You can start your presentation.
Okay. Well,
thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to this really important conference. I'm enjoying it a lot. I live in Portsmouth, which is the UK's principal naval base on the south coast of England. Our earliest fortification is the Roman Porchester Castle at the head of the harbour for defence against invading Saxons. Over the centuries, many more fortifications were built to defend the dockyard or naval base. As you can see from this map, they were added mostly in the 18th and 19th century against the French. Next slide.
Yeah.
My contribution is how much we can learn from each other about reusing defence sites. So my theme is was identified by Klaus Kunzmann, can experience travel? A question that we all need to ask, but clearly this conference is a contribution to exactly that. As Europe entered a more peaceful era in response to geopolitics, defence cuts, changes in military technology, defensive installations became redundant. This is as true as in the superpowers such as the United States and China, and it may be true of Russia, but I don't have any information about them. These properties are immensely varied and include international treasures such as the Arsenale in Venice and Ming walled cities in China. Even the Cold War's left bunkers and hangars for us to reuse, as we've heard. The United States documented their military heritage in maps, which you can see at the bottom right there. But it's hard for the locals to influence what happens next. Powerful government departments and developers may have the dominant say over the transformation of these sites from military to civilian. And that book, which you can see in the left there, which I edited with Samer Bagayin, is one of the few that I know about that tries to actually explore international experience. Next slide.
Yeah.
So these are some of the questions that arise from this complex process. Next slide.
No, excuse me.
Why do military sites close? Where are they? And what's on the site? Who has the power to influence what happens next? How is the transition from naval, air force and military to civilian uses managed? What new land uses result from the process? Can the disposal systems and the outcomes for local communities be improved? What happens to ex-defense communities? Some countries, such as Italy and Germany, invest state property in independent agencies who are responsible for managing and disposing of state property. In contrast, the UK system is highly centralised. The Ministry of Defence Infrastructure Organisation sells sites to the highest bidder at maximum planning value within 3 years. And of course, that has an enormous impact on the subsequent land uses. Next slide. Next slide. Who gains and who loses in defence disposals? It's hard for local governments to insist that developers' proposals meet what locals need. Is there a national-local conflict between definitions of the public interest? The United States has a much more locally beneficial process, as you can see on the left there, which puts locals in the driving seat. When they've made their plans, sites can be transferred to them free, unlike the UK. As I explore next, since the 1990s, the EU has funded many exchanges of experience between similar communities, some of which have published guides to their joint heritage. Next slide. EU funded and other shared experience between ex-military sites include all these different links between similar communities, usually time limited to 2 years. It might be about castles, forts, walled cities, arsenals, barracks and dockyards, which is my particular interest. And they get to visit each other's places and learn from their experience, and also work out how to transform them into new civilian life. And to this list should be added MISTA, that is military and industrial sites reuse, and also Adri Fort, which is in the Adriatic. In one case, the Asia Herbs Fund linked walled cities in Xinjiang in Liaoning province in China, Obidos in Portugal, and Portsmouth in the UK. The EU has produced model procedures for the socio-economic reuse of military land and heritage, which I examine in more details next. So some of these projects have actually produced good practice guides. Here's one: Regeneration through Heritage, Understanding the Development Potential of Historic European Arsenals, or ASEN for short. The recommendations include recognizing a site's historical significance. How will the historic site link to the rest of the town and city? What functions will it provide, and how will they benefit the neighbours? Who are the potential regeneration partners and stakeholders? Key assets such as economic gains and employment, open space, need to be included in statements of significance, keeping the wider circle of interest groups informed on development of the master plan. And there are many more other examples. Here's another one. This is military assets as public spaces. Next slide. I had the honor to speak at the last workshop of maps in Ceres in Greece, near Thessaloniki. The partners all had forts or barracks the municipalities wanted to redevelop for the benefit of their electorate. The University of Piacenza produced an excellent interactive step-by-step guide to the transformation process, and it was very much in the most important dynamism was the local government. Next slide. If we're looking at a wider research, the Bonn Institute of the Bonn International Centre for Conversion produced 2 publications examining practice in reuse of military land in Germany and Western Europe. Pertinently, the second author made suggestions on how conversion could inform a systematic field of academic inquiry in the 21st century. But unfortunately, BICC ceased researching conversion in 2021 because of a lack of resources. Next slide. What I'm asking now is, how does built heritage, defence heritage actually survive the redevelopment? Greg Ashworth produced this diagram in his book War on the City, showing 2 possible routes, one of which means they're destroyed but may be reconstructed, and the other where conservation may happen. Next slide. But what about post-defence experience in occupying power spaces? The website Abandoned Spaces has many examples of ex-Soviet bases in Eastern Europe. Documenting what has happened to them is another whole area to investigate. Next slide. I'd now have 2 suggestions about how to progress in this communication that we're having today. The first is, would countrywide associations like the United States Association of Defence Communities be useful? When I talked about this to Historic England, they said all our sites are too diverse, but I don't think that's necessarily a disadvantage. Basically, all the active bases in the United States and the ones which are closing actually have a lobby in Washington, which is what this is. And they also exchange experience through regular conferences and a weekly newsletter. So that means that they know what's happening in other similar sites. And they're also up to date with government policy. But actually, since the Biden took over, there have been no defense site closures in the United States, interestingly, and that's because local politicians campaign against any such closure. Next slide. So what I'm clearly saying is that we clearly need some form of communication if we are to actually achieve sustainable transformation of these very special sites to benefit ex-defence communities. And clearly we need vision, we need creativity, we need imagination and ingenuity. And these are absolutely vital, not only to achieve sustainable land uses, but also in financing, which is only actually been mentioned once, but it's absolutely critical. And you can imagine that's very difficult in the case of the UK when the sites are sold to the highest bidder. There's also decontamination, which has been touched on. And as the Serbian speaker said, genuine public participation in planning, creative repurposing of existing structures to ensure long-term life for these very special places is pretty important. And for that reason, the University of Portsmouth School of Architecture is in the process of applying for a grant to set up a network where we can all talk to each other. So I hope it achieves that objective as a continuation of this conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Celia. Very, very interesting presentation. I love it. Here we can start a debate. Well, also from your last words, as you say that the University of Portsmouth is going to apply for funding in trying to keep researching, as also the big institution just left to study this the military conversion process due to the lack of funding. This is also something that we surely understand. It's happening in Italy and other countries, as this conference is I'm speaking in Spanish, Italian, English, so I'm just a bit crazy today. This conference, the basis of this conference was just a 1 year research grant without mostly any funding, that then Francesco Gastaldi and I just received some funding to go ahead with the publication of a collective volume from this event. So if you have any comments, any suggestion or questions for our very good authors, please go ahead. No one is going maybe to ask nothing. Okay, one. Veneta, please go.
I'm sorry about the sound. I hope it's okay now. My question
is
the
same.
Sorry, very sorry.
No worries.
First time it happens. My question is to Celia, but I think some of the other panelists also touched this topic. It is about the communities of the former military staff that should be in the focus, or at least should be included in the future development of the plots. This is something that is still out of the agenda of our decision makers here. Is it different in Portsmouth, or it's going a long process to achieve their involvement in the process?
Well, my PhD was actually about this, and I compared a site I was involved in Portsmouth where we failed to influence what happened. It's called Gun Wharf, and it's now a big shopping centre and private residential site, with what happened in Plymouth, which is 120 miles away from here, but in the West Country, which is another naval base. And there, the local people, who are extremely disadvantaged in a actually municipal housing, they learned how to participate. Now that's absolutely critical. They need to learn the language of the planners and the financiers and the local. They need to get the local government to listen, which in our case we failed to do. They went on a training course to do that. And as a result, they were able to completely transform their municipal housing estate and their future and their children's future. And that's because they got the opportunity to learn how to participate. And I think that's absolutely critical. We thought we knew, but I'm still involved in more sites in Portsmouth. I've just written a book about all the sites around the harbour. Public participation is a failure here, although it's much better on the other side of the harbour than it is in Portsmouth. And that's because the defence heritage has been identified as a theme for development. They have something called a heritage action zone. In fact, they've got two. Now that's backed by Gosport Borough Council in a way that doesn't happen here. So it is very patchy.
Thank you very much. Learning to understand and to speak technical language seems something very important. Actually, I meet this topic for a second time today, so it surely is very important.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much for the answer and your for the question, your answer, Celia. I just also put your 2020 book on the chat. So Celia, some questions, as we have more time due to some authors that did not present. Which country in Europe do you think is more advanced in approaching the redevelopment of former military sites in a successful way?
Oh, it's obvious. It's Italy. When I realized it, I mean, I got to know Donatella Fiorino, who's speaking in the following session, and Monica Vargiu, and I took part in a military landscapes conference in Cagliari, and there were people there from as far away as South Korea. And actually, in the book that I edited, I have 2 Chinese case studies and 1 Taiwanese. And clearly, there are opportunities for us to learn from each other. But are the governments listening?
Yeah, that's quite a problem.
They are in Italy. When I spoke, I was thrilled. I was sitting next to 2 generals, right, who are responsible for military property. Now, here in the UK, the Ministry of Defence is not interested in any of this research, which is very depressing.
Yeah, it is. I also found difficult to speak with the Italian Minister of Defense. I tried to contact them to involve them in this conference, and then lately, yesterday night, one architect asked me to participate, and I said, "Look, you're a little bit late." And that's the Spanish Minister of Defense. But eventually, I did speak with them, but too late for their participation. Also, maybe for COVID-19 restriction. Well, and what do you think would be, Celia, the next step for the research? As I already read in your new book, you put some questions about a new future research agenda. Could you just summarize them here in some minutes? As you already have partially done it during your presentation.
Well, one of the things that's critical is who owns a site. Now, as I've said, in the UK and the US, the government hangs on to the military site, right? So they're disposing of it. But one of the big plus factors I forgot to mention was in the United States, not only are the local municipalities allowed to determine what happens and then they get the site free, also inside the Department of Defense, there's something called the Office of Economic Adjustment, which is now called something about communities. And that actually has money, right? So if there's a problem, like there's decontamination to be done or transformation to be done, they actually offer locals money to help tackle that problem. I don't know of any other country that quite does that, but I get a hint of it in some of the Italian examples. Clearly, a lot depends on the capacity of the people involved, right? Are the military listening? Well, in our case, it's the Defence Infrastructure Organisation. They certainly aren't listening, but they've just been criticised by the Public Accounts Committee because they haven't sold more sites than they said they would. But the point is, all the money comes back to central government. So the proceeds are measured financially, right? But we need to add these other measures, these social measures, these environmental measures. and sustainability achievement. All of those don't exist in the UK, but although they're beginning to change. But obviously, where you have a very centralized country like the UK, it's very different from Italy. Well, clearly, there's a lot more a local autonomy. And I think that's true in Germany as well, because it's a federal country, and it's certainly true in the United States. So I think the shape of the local government and their behavior over state land varies a lot because of that reason. But I think we could, between us, actually identify a list quite easily from the different aspects you've already covered, and we haven't heard the Spanish speakers yet. And if we did that, then we could then identify who is interested in those. And so we would then have a sort of agenda to work to. Would that work?
Let's see. Let's find out together. And one question to Simona Bravaglieri. Simona, are you here?
Hello, Simona.
Yes.
Lovely
Hello.
to see you.
So nice to see you both.
When you saw Henry VIII outside the dockyard gate.
Yes, sorry.
Simona, so do you you based your research is on Cold War sites in Italy. So during this your PhD research period, do you find did you do specific fieldworks in Italy but also abroad, or do you specifically base your research in the northeastern Italy sites?
No, I'm focusing on Italy, and my main objective was to try to map all the sites. The beginning of the research was very, how can I say, I wanted to do a lot of work. But talking about international cases that I've looked at, of course, I went to the UK, where I met Silvia and Dean as well. And I went to Sweden as also. So these are two cases that I analyzed because they started the identification process quite soon, already in the 90s, and with two very different approaches. The UK is very analytical, and it was done by the English heritage, so it came from the institutions, and they try to also try to map all the sites and to try to also listing them, at least some of them. At the end of this process, 60 of them were listed. But in Sweden did a quite different approach. There was an identification, but then talking about networking, they created a network of museums that talked about the Cold War, and they are still open, and they are financing them. Every couple of years they try to understand if the network is still the museums are still working, and they try to confirm the funding of these museums. So it's kind of a very different approach, also because in Sweden they fund museums that are already opened, and in the UK it was quite different because some of the sites are not even used now. So yeah, these are the two case studies that I.
Okay, so
maybe I can just say something to Celia. If you have never heard about the fourth circuit in Trentino, that is also a very interesting case of networking between museums. Because since I know that you are very interested in knowing examples, and I know that that's worked pretty well.
Oh, can I also reply to that the University of Cambridge have just acquired the bunker in Cambridge for their archives. There were an alternative which wasn't allowed.
Yeah, no more marijuana in the bunkers.
or at least in that one.
So now we change country and we change also languages as we start with the Spanish session. So por favor, Luis Santos y Ganges, el director del Instituto Universitario de Urbanística, ¿estás aquí?
Aquí estoy.
Muy bien, Luis.
Buenas
Entonces,
tardes.
Buenas tardes. ¿Cómo os he presentado esta mañana? Pues si por un lado el instituto, la Universidad de Iuav está celebrando el aniversario número 50 de la institución del primer curso, de la primer curso de urbanismo en la universidad, este año el Instituto Universitario de Urbanística cumple 30 años de su fundación. Y aquí vamos a tener dos sus representantes con nosotros. El primero es Luis Santos y Ganges. Entonces, por favor, Luis, adelante, puedes compartir la pantalla y comenzar con tu presentación. Gracias.
¿Cómo debo hacerlo? Perdona, que este programa no le manejo bien.
Vale, pues si tú vas con el mouse más o menos en el medio donde hay el punto rojo con 7 horas, 26 minutos, 33 segundos, hay una cámara, hay un micrófono y abrir bandeja de uso compartido. Si encuentras...
Compartir contenido, sí.
Sí. Haz clic en eso.
Ya lo he dado, a ver si funciona.
Sí, debería funcionar. Aquí está tu presentación.
¿Se ve bien?
Sí, se ve bien.
Lo tengo en otra pantalla, pero bueno. Bien, bueno, yo quería iniciar, buenas tardes, quería iniciar dándole enhorabuena, ¿no?, a Federico Camerin y Francesco Gastaldi por esta iniciativa que además está funcionando muy bien y que es muy interesante. Y en segundo lugar, bueno, pedir disculpas porque yo de espacios militares y sus usos lo conozco muy colateralmente, conozco algunos casos locales, pero es un asunto que no he seguido. Y por lo tanto mi participación aquí sería consiste en comparar las formas institucionales, también jurídicas, de plantear qué hacer con los suelos militares en comparación con los suelos ferroviarios, del cual sí soy experto. Por eso hablo de la gestión de la gran propiedad inmobiliaria por parte de organismos públicos, militares y ferroviarios. Organismo público es un concepto jurídico de la legislación española, de la administración pública española. A ver cómo paso, que no quiere pasar. Ahí. Bien, en principio son dos modelos de gestión que parecen diferentes. ¿Por qué? Porque el organismo que gestiona los suelos militares pertenece al sector público administrativo. En prácticamente toda Europa el derecho administrativo está cambiando, sobre todo de la mano de la obligación de regular los contratos públicos de las empresas públicas con la administración pública. Esa regulación de los contratos públicos ha hecho que se racionalice todos los entes fuera de la puramente administración, y que hay de cientos en todos los países, y de tal manera que en España se distingue entre el sector público administrativo y el sector público empresarial. Pues bien, los espacios militares en España son administrados, gestionados desde el derecho público administrativo y por un organismo que pertenece al sector público administrativo, mientras que los suelos ferroviarios son administrados por una entidad que en España se conoce con el nombre de entidad pública empresarial, es decir, un mix entre sociedad anónima y organismo autónomo, una cosa intermedia que tiene carácter empresarial, pero que al mismo tiempo administra bastantes cosas de la administración pública, algo intermedio, y por lo tanto pertenece al sector público empresarial. Sin embargo, para casi todas sus actividades, no para todas, se mueve en el ámbito del derecho privado. Claro, aquí la cuestión entonces es en qué medida, qué diferencias entre una y la otra a la hora de cubrir o de tener bien cubierto el interés general, es decir, cómo tener en cuenta el interés general. ¿En qué consiste el interés general? Porque el interés general es interpretable. Tanto el organismo autónomo que gestiona los suelos militares como la entidad pública empresarial que gestiona los suelos ferroviarios tienen fines específicos, tienen que mantener su propio organismo, que tiene unos fines especiales de mantenimiento, de construcción, etc. Entonces esos fines específicos del interés general no son realmente el interés general. Y todo esto se da en un contexto que tiene ya del orden de 40 años, pero que se inició al arranque de la mitad del siglo XX, por el cual se tiende a crear organismos nuevos. Se empezó con agencias, con instituciones especiales y al final pues hay organismos autónomos, entidades empresariales y últimamente incluso muchísimas sociedades anónimas. Si en España las entidades públicas empresariales deben perseguir el interés de mantener el ferrocarril, pero son, al fin y al cabo, no son empresas puras, tanto en Portugal como en Francia como en Italia, son sociedades anónimas, son sociedades por acciones. Eso sí, son sociedades públicas en Francia y en Portugal. En España es 100% público, pero todavía no es una sociedad anónima. Son holding de sociedades anónimas. Entonces, claro, en ese contexto liberal de disminución de los presupuestos generales del Estado, estos organismos se ven en la obligación de buscar un modo de financiarse fuera de los presupuestos ordinarios. A esto se le llama obtener recursos extraordinarios y esa obtención va por la vía inmobiliaria. De tal manera que tenemos un riesgo muy evidente, que es el de que el sector público, que gestiona patrimonios inmobiliarios públicos, se comporte como un agente privado y por lo tanto favorezca la especulación, que es justo lo que debería combatir en tanto es administración. Claro, aquí la pregunta es, pero es que no es administración, es sector público. Entonces, ¿qué estamos haciendo? Prostituir los intereses públicos y la propiedad pública y los fines públicos, haciendo estas distinciones bizantinas de administración pública y sector público. Eso es un pequeño autoengaño. En España los dos organismos, el organismo autónomo dentro del derecho todavía administrativo es el Instituto de Vivienda, Infraestructura y Equipamiento de la Defensa, organismo autónomo, mientras que ADIF es el administrador de las infraestructuras ferroviarias y es una entidad pública empresarial. Son dos categorías diferentes del sector público. Las entidades públicas empresariales se mueven directamente en el derecho privado y además tienen patrimonio propio. Patrimonio propio. Cuando un bien del dominio público ferroviario se desafecta, se convierte en bien patrimonial de la empresa, de la entidad pública empresarial. Sin embargo, un suelo militar cuando se desafecta sigue siendo, es un bien patrimonial, pero del Estado, no de INVIEZ. Sería del Estado, pero el INVIEZ gestiona un espacio que, aun siendo del Estado, tiene una autorización para poder gestionarlo y aprovechar el recurso, aprovechar el dinero resultante, las plusvalías inmobiliarias obtenidas. De tal manera que, aunque se mueven en el derecho público y tienen menos agilidad, vamos a decir, su comportamiento es el mismo, porque aunque el patrimonio sea del Estado, tiene su obligación de obtener ingresos propios a través de la explotación de los bienes inmobiliarios. Los dos, por lo tanto, por vías diferentes, hacen una política muy similar. Tanto uno como otro tiene una historia muy larga. Piensen en el INVIEZ, es heredero del Servicio Militar de Construcciones que se crea en el 43. El Instituto de la Vivienda, que a su vez es heredero de unos patronatos que se crean en los años 20, en 1920 en España. Después la Gerencia de Infraestructura de Defensa, que se crea en los 80, es decir, que tiene una historia larguísima, pero en los últimos años, a raíz de estas nuevas leyes que reorganizan la administración pública y el sector público, aquí abajo ustedes lo ven, como hay un nuevo estatuto que ha sido modificado, acondicionado, es decir, tenemos legislación bastante reciente para permitir ese principio que llaman de flexibilidad y de eficiencia, que a mi parecer lo que hace es hacerse mover a las administraciones o a estas entidades públicas en el derecho privado y por lo tanto especular. En el caso de Administración de Infraestructuras Ferroviarias es un heredero de Renfe que se crea en 1941, es decir, los dos se crean en los años 40. Han tenido diversos cambios. En el caso ferroviario, derivado de directivas europeas que obligaban a diferenciar entre la infraestructura ferroviaria y los trenes y los movimientos de la gestión ferroviaria, y después un desgajamiento de la alta velocidad respecto de lo que no es alta velocidad, y eso ha supuesto también que tengan estatutos propios, no solamente leyes de creación, sino estatutos jurídicos decretados para regular cómo funcionan. Fíjense, aquí tenemos entre comillas expresiones legales. La finalidad de las actividades inmobiliarias y urbanísticas del INVIEZ será garantizar la financiación precisa para su funcionamiento. O en el caso de la ADIF, el ADIF tendrá un patrimonio propio, distinto del de la Administración General del Estado, integrado por el conjunto de sus bienes. Y para poder hacer eso, para poder funcionar y poder obtener esos recursos inmobiliarios, el primer paso es retener el suelo. Si se retiene suelo, y se espera el momento adecuado, se tiene capacidad de retener, entonces los ayuntamientos tarde o temprano quieren acordar con este organismo público un protocolo o acuerdo. Obtenido ese protocolo o acuerdo por el cual la ordenación urbanística se adapta a las necesidades del organismo público y al revés, finalmente se firma un convenio y a raíz de ese convenio ya se materializa, se ordena y se materializa, se desafectan los bienes. Es decir, la desafección del suelo no es anterior. No hay desafección del suelo hasta que existe un convenio. Eso es un mecanismo de fuerza de los organismos públicos frente a la administración local. La administración local, por lo tanto, se encuentra en situación de debilidad frente a estos organismos que son prácticamente administraciones y muy potentes y encima que se comportan como agentes privados inmobiliarios. A ver si pasa. No logro que pase. Bien, termino entonces. Conclusiones, perspectivas. Tenemos un auge de hay muchísimos entes. Entre las administraciones autonómicas y del Estado y locales en España hay 500 entes del sector público fuera de la administración. Estamos hablando de 2 en concreto de esos 500. Estatales, perdón, sumando los locales suman 2.000. Entonces hay un auge de esos entes del sector público frente a la propia administración pública y eso se debe a esa huida del derecho administrativo. Se pretende siempre trabajar en el derecho privado porque se le supone que es más ágil, más flexible, pero también mucho cuidado da lugar a la posible corrupción y a diferentes manejos y, por supuesto, siempre olvidar en qué consiste el interés general. Una explotación inmobiliaria de estos organismos públicos que es similar a de los agentes privados y que, por lo tanto, en un suelo que es público, deja de ser dominio público y pasa a ser un bien patrimonial, se gestiona como si fuera un bien patrimonial de una empresa, no un bien patrimonial público. Y, por lo tanto, se produce especulación inmobiliaria institucional. Y estoy hablando en términos teóricos y en términos reales, prácticos. Mi compañero Miguel Fernández Maroto seguramente contará y explicará diversos casos en los que eso se puede comprobar. Yo el caso militar no lo conozco bien. Por lo tanto, ¿qué debemos hacer? ¿Qué perspectivas hay respecto de esto? De esta crítica que, por supuesto, prácticamente nadie hace en España. Pues hay que establecer, por lo menos, ya que este modelo está muy implantado, consolidado. Empezó en España en los años 80 a instalarse, ya está muy consolidado, tiene 40 años de funcionamiento. Hay que establecer limitaciones a este modo de obtener recursos extrapresupuestarios. Porque en un contexto en que el presupuesto general del Estado tienden a disminuirse, estos organismos públicos tienden que compensar ese déficit presupuestario a base de obtener recursos extrapresupuestarios y, por lo tanto, se está obligando a estos organismos públicos a comportarse como especuladores inmobiliarios. El interés general no debe depender solo de la fuerza de un ayuntamiento frente a estos organismos públicos. Tiene que haber unas limitaciones en el nivel del Estado y, por supuesto, debería haber, a mi parecer, una política pública de vivienda que obligara a poner a disposición, si no todo, una buena parte de estos suelos para que hubiera una política pública de vivienda y no que haya lo que hay, que es una especulación inmobiliaria por parte de los organismos públicos. Creo que no he agotado el tiempo. Muchísimas gracias. Gracias, Federico, Francesco, y estoy a vuestra disposición.
Gracias. Muchísimas gracias, Luis. De verdad nos has introducido la temática de una forma muy, muy adecuada. Y ahora vamos a pasar a la profesora Verónica Yasmín García Morales de la Universidad UB de Barcelona. ¿Estás aquí, Verónica?
Sí, estoy por aquí. No sé si se...
Muy bien.
escucha. Perfecto.
Perfecto. Entonces, puedes compartir la pantalla y comenzar su presentación.
Vale, un momento porque pone que está cargando. A ver.
Sí. Y sabemos que también hoy hemos pasado por algunos momentos un poco así con las presentaciones, pero es lo que hay. Ahora se está cargando, parece. Ahí está.
Vale. Perfecto.
Diritto amministrativo.
Sí, derecho administrativo.
Perfecto, pues si se ve bien.
Sí, bebé, adelante.
Sí.
Muy bien, pues esta comunicación que se presenta hoy aquí es sobre el reparto competencial para regenerar culturalmente las instalaciones militares en desuso, una breve mirada, ¿no?, desde España. Bueno, también quiero mencionar que esta comunicación se enmarca en un proyecto de investigación que estamos desarrollando, que es sobre administración compartida y bienes comunes, derecho y políticas públicas mediante gobernanza colaborativa. Y bien, aquí, bueno, es aunar distintas políticas públicas, como veremos, como una pequeña propuesta para poder regenerar desde una perspectiva cultural a instalaciones militares en desuso. Y para ello, bueno, es importante partir de ese entramado competencial, de ese reparto de competencias que es complejo, pero que, bueno, es lo que sucede en cualquier estado que es territorialmente compuesto. Por ello, en un primer momento, también en esta investigación, pues nos estamos acercando precisamente a todo este reparto y esta distribución de competencias para identificar esos intereses concurrentes y cuáles son esos criterios para resolver los posibles conflictos que surgen en su articulación. Y como vemos aquí en el punto 2, 3 y 4, pues podemos hablar de esa política de defensa, que allí tiene un protagonismo evidentemente el Estado como una competencia exclusiva. Vemos la política cultural, vemos también la política urbanística municipal, que tiene o debería tener un especial protagonismo, que aquí van apuntando una de las propuestas, y finalmente un ejemplo muy concreto sobre la regeneración cultural, cómo es importante que en esta regeneración cultural pues existan pactos de colaboración. Bien, sin extenderme mucho en estos puntos, una breve referencia únicamente a cómo es ese reparto que se hace a partir de la Constitución Española del 78. Y aquí vemos 3 tipos de competencias que son importantes para luego ver toda esta regeneración, como les decía, desde una perspectiva cultural. Por un lado, tendríamos como competencia exclusiva la materia de defensa, como competencias concurrentes en sentido estricto la materia de cultura. Esto significa que todas las entidades territoriales puedan intervenir, por ejemplo, en un espacio físico concreto para proyectar una política cultural y que, bueno, cada una de estas decisiones en principio no tiene una preferencia aplicativa. Aquí no habría una prevalencia de una decisión respecto a otra. Y finalmente sería una concurrencia en sentido amplio, que es cuando hay distintas competencias de distintas entidades territoriales y que necesariamente es lo que comúnmente se ha planteado, ha de prevalecer una. Y aquí, en este caso, plantearíamos defensa, cultura, urbanismo, incluso medio ambiente urbano, que aquí la jurisprudencia, por ejemplo, del Tribunal Constitucional Español también ya incorpora la vertiente cultural en ese medio ambiente urbano. Bien, el primer título, que sería el exclusivo, un título competencial exclusivo del Estado, que es el de Defensa y Fuerzas Armadas, que sucede cuando, una instalación militar surge de este título competencial, que sucede cuando hay otras decisiones territoriales, ya sea de comunidades autónomas en materia medioambiental o en materia de vivienda, o en el ámbito municipal, las urbanísticas, que sucede cuando empieza a colisionar con este título competencial. Digamos que aquí esa competencia del Estado tiene una prevalencia tan fuerte, muy vinculado precisamente ese interés general a la defensa nacional. Cuando se entiende que en la Constitución española, pues tanto el Estado como las comunidades autónomas como los municipios defienden en el ejercicio de sus competencias el interés general, aquí se aplica un criterio de prevalencia a favor del Estado conforme a este criterio. En materia de cultura pasa un poco lo mismo cuando les decía que aquí no tendría que aplicarse ese criterio de prevalencia, pero al final hay una especie de jerarquización de estos intereses. Y entonces vemos que va a prevalecer esa decisión estatal, que está vinculado a su competencia en materia de defensa, va a prevalecer la decisión, por ejemplo, autonómica, en relación a la decisión municipal, aludiendo también a un interés supralocal, es decir, superior al ámbito municipal. Y aquí en este aspecto tendríamos como el núcleo central de esta propuesta y de donde se identifican los principales retos, tanto competenciales como administrativos para esa regeneración cultural de las instalaciones militares en desuso. Es decir, el ámbito municipal, si vamos nosotros a la Constitución española, no encontraremos materias concretas donde los municipios puedan actuar. Es una alusión genérica y abstracta, no el 137 y el 140 de la Constitución, que señalan que los municipios pues, van a poder ejercer el poder de acuerdo al marco normativo del Estado y las comunidades autónomas. Pero bien, a partir de aquí, y aquí sí que se ha configurado toda la competencia municipal desde el punto de vista urbanístico, aquí sí que hay un interés local, un interés municipal fuerte, y por tanto, digamos que el municipio tendría que tener o tiene que tener un protagonismo en su política urbanística. Y entonces aquí hay un cambio del marco conceptual que es importante y que se está incorporando al régimen jurídico administrativo de la ciudad y que ya pasamos a hablar del derecho de la ciudad, es decir, el régimen jurídico de los usos del suelo, equipamiento, aprovechamiento urbanístico y demás, pero pasamos a hablar de un concepto distinto que es el derecho a la ciudad. Y aquí en el derecho a la ciudad hay dos conceptos claves desde esta perspectiva que nos ayudan a abrir esas posibilidades de regenerar culturalmente estos espacios desde la actuación municipal. Y que es la idea de proximidad, es decir, ya no desde esa competencia estatal centralizada, muy focalizada en el ámbito de la defensa, sino pues precisamente lo más apegado al territorio, que sería la administración municipal, con la participación en la gestión de los bienes comunes. Aquí, en los 3 puntos siguientes, pues podemos ver ya algunas referencias de este tipo de administración compartida o de estos tipos de pactos de colaboración. Por ejemplo, en la Carta Municipal de Barcelona, en el artículo 34, ya prevé precisamente pues, la gestión ciudadana de determinadas competencias municipales. En este caso, pues sería posible incluso que esas instalaciones militares en desuso pues pudiera haber esta gestión cívica, si esto se pudiera ceder a los ayuntamientos, pues aquí habría una gestión cívica de esta competencia más enfocado al ámbito cultural. Bueno, aquí hay otras 2 referencias, la Carta Europea de Salvaguarda de los Derechos Humanos en la Ciudad, que también incorpora esta perspectiva, y una sentencia del Tribunal Supremo Español de 2018 que incorpora precisamente en un caso de planeamiento urbanístico municipal, aunque aquí es desde la perspectiva de género, pero digamos que el esquema o la dinámica es más o menos ese marco conceptual, incorpora precisamente el concepto del derecho a la ciudad en los términos en los que se ha referido quien ha acuñado este concepto, esta teoría, que es Lefebvre. Bien, finalmente, únicamente por destacar un ejemplo aplicado a esta necesidad de que haya esta apertura o esta consolidación de estas competencias a nivel local, la regeneración cultural de las instalaciones militares, en el caso de Barcelona hay un ejemplo muy concreto que sería el cuartel del Bruc. Este espacio está en una zona de la ciudad pues, donde hay una sede universitaria importante y aquí pues, se podría plantear hacer equipamientos culturales para jóvenes. Actualmente, pues al ayuntamiento ya ha solicitado que se cedan estos espacios para que lo gestione la administración municipal, pero no se ha llevado a cabo. Algunas de las propuestas que se han hecho es destinarlo a vivienda social, pero bueno, a partir de aquí, desde esta propuesta que también estamos haciendo en el marco del proyecto de investigación, pues sería reforzar esa política cultural a través de un equipamiento cultural y sobre todo estos pactos de colaboración que sea interadministrativo, es decir, que hemos visto que ese reparto de competencial es complejo y que tiende a ser centralizador, es decir, actúa por bloques y no de forma interrelacionada, como pediría un poco la perspectiva del derecho a la ciudad. Por tanto, esos pactos de colaboración están esos retos allí en esas relaciones interadministrativas, pero también esa gestión colaborativa que abre a la participación ciudadana, es decir, a la gestión cívica de estos espacios comunes en la ciudad, que sería muy interesante poder consolidar esa perspectiva que es más bien cultural. Sin más, les agradezco mucho su atención y esta sería mi comunicación. Muchas gracias.
Muchísimas gracias a ti, Verónica, muy interesante. Y ahora pasamos a Luis Gené Gil y Gabriela Lomar Garabau. Por favor, estás aquí. Y nada, pues adelante.
Gracias, Federico. Bueno, la presentación la voy a presentar yo, que soy Gabriel Alomar. Pero bueno, Iuav también está atento a todo esto. Voy a compartir la pantalla. ¿La veis en pantalla?
Sí.
Presentación, perfecto.
Sí.
Sí, todo correcto.
Dime, Federico.
Correcto, todo correcto.
Muy bien, pues bueno, empezar por dar las buenas tardes a todos, a las ponentes y los ponentes de esta conferencia internacional, bueno, pues dedicada a la regeneración de instalaciones militares en desuso. Creemos nosotros ya tan bien organizada por vosotros los responsables, y a la que nosotros hemos querido presentar una comunicación dedicada a un caso específico, diríamos, de espacio militar en desuso, como es el del gran cuartel militar de Son Busquets, que está localizado en la ciudad mediterránea de Palma. Palma es la capital de las Islas Baleares y que además es la ciudad, por supuesto, principal de la isla de Mallorca. Bueno, pues los objetivos de nuestro trabajo han sido los que podemos ver en pantalla y que podemos reducir a 3 objetivos principales. Por una parte, hemos querido describir el caso de este cuartel como un espacio que puede tener un muy importante papel en el desarrollo urbanístico de una parte de la ciudad de Palma, y por otra parte hemos querido reivindicar la vacante urbana, digamos, que supone este antiguo cuartel, bueno, pues como un laboratorio urbano mediante el cual podamos demostrar que es posible regenerar determinados espacios urbanos bajo criterios ecológicos de sostenibilidad urbana y también, por supuesto, de resiliencia. Y por último, como objetivo, hemos querido proponer esta gran vacante urbana como creadora de una nueva centralidad que ayude a transformar la ciudad de Palma en una ciudad más policéntrica. Bueno, pues este cuartel, que ahora vemos un poco alguna fotografía, se construyó en 1949 y su actividad como tal se dio por finalizada en el año 2000. De manera que estuvo el cuartel plenamente operativo durante unos 50 años y lleva abandonado y en desuso hace poco más de 20 años. Y el caso del antiguo cuartel de Son Busquets creemos que tiene mucho interés para nosotros y lo creemos por diferentes motivos. El primer motivo es que se trata de un espacio que ocupa 11 hectáreas de terreno en un solar urbano que por su gran extensión, diríamos, ha sido calificado como el último gran vacío urbano de la ciudad de Palma, ¿no? Y en relación con esto es realmente muy interesante este calificativo de vacío o de vacante urbana, ¿no? Al que algunos autores, entre ellos, por ejemplo, el arquitecto Ignacio Solá Morales, se referían con el nombre o la expresión francesa de terrain vague, ¿no? En el sentido de terrenos indiferenciados, libres de actividad, improductivos, a menudo, digamos, obsoletos y a veces que no tienen un horizonte claro de futuro, ¿no? Terrenos vacantes son tan conocidos como, por ejemplo, terrenos militares abandonados, como en nuestro caso, márgenes residuales de bordes de cursos de agua, vertederos, canteras, intersticios, diríamos, infrautilizados entre autopistas, demoliciones inconclusas. Los casos son conocidos y variados. Bueno, pues, y en el caso es que para este tipo de espacios marginales o marginalizados a veces, es decir, espacios a la espera del gran proyecto, se han propuesto la práctica de un urbanismo adaptativo o un urbanismo también llamado del mientras tanto o también, como sabemos, urbanismo táctico. Bueno, pues sea como sea, en el caso de Son Busquets, el calificativo de gran vacío o de vacante urbana hay que decir que es un poco relativo, porque en este gran solar, como vemos en pantalla, se conservan prácticamente la totalidad de los edificios, de los hangares, de los edificios residenciales para oficiales, las infraestructuras de almacenamiento de agua. Además, también se conserva una rica infraestructura vegetal formada por árboles, por arbustos de diversas especies y además también de huertos frutícolas, ¿no? Bueno, un segundo motivo de interés es que Son Busquets está situado en una barriada periférica al norte de la ciudad de Palma, como vemos en pantalla, ¿no? En concreto, Son Busquets está situado entre los barrios llamados en Palma de Cascapiscol y del Camp Redó, que son estas, unas barriadas, digamos, densamente pobladas y que en algunos casos acusan, ciertos problemas de degradación física y también de degradación social. Bueno, pues esto hace que Son Busquets se esté valorando como solución a las necesidades del barrio y de la ciudad entera incluso, de dotarse de nuevas zonas verdes, de nuevo espacio libre público y también de viviendas sociales que ayuden a paliar pues, el conocido déficit de vivienda pública en la ciudad, ¿no? No sería el primer caso el de Palma, sino que debe haber más casos en otras ciudades mediterráneas europeas. Bueno, pues estas intenciones son las que se recogen, de hecho, en un plan especial de reforma interior, nosotros lo llamamos el PERI, ¿no? Plan Especial de Reforma Interior, específicamente dedicado a Son Busquets y en el que se prevé la construcción de 831 viviendas en régimen de protección pública, lo que supone una superficie total dedicada, bueno, aquí tenemos los datos, ¿no? De casi 150.000 metros cuadrados, y además de una superficie dedicada a espacios libres públicos verdes, que esto es lo interesante para nosotros, de unos 25.000 metros cuadrados. Hay que decir que los terrenos de Son Busquets, cuyo planta general vemos en pantalla, son propiedad del Ministerio de Defensa. Y lo que se pretende es que la titularidad de esta vacante pase a ser del actual Ministerio de Fomento, como una forma de garantizar que los terrenos pasarán a tener un uso público, ¿no? Bueno, pues por lo que a nosotros respecta, y así lo hemos señalado y lo hemos destacado en nuestra comunicación escrita, Son Busquets también hay que valorarlo porque puede jugar un importante papel no solo como un espacio que deje de ser una discontinuidad urbana más, sino sobre todo porque en Son Busquets, porque digamos un Son Busquets regenerado puede actuar de nuevo polo urbano de atracción que ayude a descentralizar una ciudad como Palma, cuyo centro de operaciones no deja de estar todavía y en muchos sentidos sigue estando sobre todo en el casco urbano antiguo, que es el que vemos aquí, que estoy señalando con el cursor, creo que se debe ver, el casco antiguo histórico de Palma que está aquí, ¿no? Que todavía conserva ese centro de operaciones que llamamos nosotros, ¿no? Bueno, pues de esta manera, tal y como lo vemos nosotros, la regeneración urbanística de Son Busquets crearía una nueva centralidad en Palma y por tanto contribuiría a hacer de esta ciudad interesante, ya una gran ciudad, podemos decirlo así, o una ciudad media si queremos, hacer de ella una ciudad más policéntrica y en este sentido menos dependiente de su centro histórico. Además de esto, lo que a nosotros nos ha interesado especialmente es ver cómo esa nueva centralidad de un Son Busquets reintervenido urbanísticamente y también arquitectónicamente, esa regeneración podría ir de la mano de uno de los ejes peatonales llamados en Palma ejes cívicos que están programados por el planeamiento urbano de Palma. En concreto, el eje peatonal que ya existe en la calle Blanquerna, que es la que vemos, bueno, pues aquí, ¿no? Este gran eje, el eje peatonal que ya existe en la calle Blanquerna y su futura prolongación mediante la peatonalización de la calle Colliure, ¿no? Que sería la continuación de la calle Blanquerna. Bueno, pues el caso es que la unión o la sutura de estos ejes, ¿vale? Que juntos formarían un eje peatonal de unos 1.800 metros de longitud, nosotros lo vemos como un eje, nosotros y el Ayuntamiento de Palma también, un eje que previsiblemente permitirá unir el centro de Palma, que es este de aquí, con el barrio periférico del Camp Redó y su otra pata, que sería Son Busquets, a partir de ahí dar el salto, digamos, a la periferia rural de Palma, que es la que vemos aquí señalada con el nombre de Parque Agrario Norte. Una periferia rural del norte de Palma que, por cierto, como digo, ya se está planeando como lo que se conoce como un parque agrario, ¿no? Que es una figura territorial que ya sabéis que cuenta con una amplia literatura en el campo del urbanismo y de la ordenación territorial. De esta manera, con un eje cívico como el de Blanquerna o Blanquerna-Colliure, en la ciudad de Palma sería o será posible transitar desde una escala propiamente urbana, como es la de la ciudad, a una escala más territorial, es decir, a la escala del propio Parque Agrario Norte, y que además tiene esa escala territorial una clara vocación paisajística. Bueno, pues estábamos en lo de los motivos por los cuales creemos que el antiguo cuartel de Son Busquets tiene mucho interés, así que para ir acabando con mi intervención, vamos a decir que un tercer motivo es precisamente que Son Busquets fue objeto en el año 2018 de un concurso de ideas planteado por un colectivo local de jóvenes arquitectos para transformar la vacante urbana de Son Busquets en algo que no partiera de la anticuada premisa urbanística de la tabula rasa, ¿no? Es decir, este concurso de ideas hay que decir que fue muy bienvenido porque atrajo proyectos locales, proyectos regionales, proyectos, digamos, europeos también, y en todos estos proyectos de este concurso de ideas se valoraba la necesidad de conservar los elementos patrimoniales y los elementos naturales, vegetales de Son Busquets para, digamos, reinterpretarlos creativamente, por supuesto, y darles una nueva vida, una nueva oportunidad arquitectónica y una nueva oportunidad ecológica, al fin y al cabo. Bueno, pues no hay tiempo para más, creo que estoy en mi tiempo, así que muchas gracias por vuestra atención, la atención recibida, y supongo que adelante con los nuevos ponentes.
Muchísimas gracias, Gabriel, por habernos presentado estos trabajos sobre las bases de estos 3 ejes. Muy interesante para focalizar la atención sobre un cuartel en desuso. Ahora vamos a dar la palabra a Miguel Fernández Maroto. Miguel.
Hola.
Hola. ¿Puedes compartir la pantalla y presentar tu valioso trabajo? Muchas gracias.
Segundín. Vale, ¿veis la presentación?
Sí, la vemos.
Vale, muy bien. Bueno, pues nada, lo primero, lógicamente, dar la enhorabuena a Federico y a Francesco por la jornada. Es un placer acompañaros hoy. Es un placer también coincidir con el resto de ponentes de esta sesión, algunos ya conocidos, otros nuevos. Y bueno, yo lo que voy a tratar en este caso, mi presentación está muy focalizada en un caso ejemplificador de algunas de las cuestiones que, por ejemplo, mencionaba Luis antes, ¿no? Luis hacía referencia a esa especulación inmobiliaria institucional. No lo hemos preparado así, creedme, pero yo creo que mi presentación va a intentar demostrar a través de un caso práctico cómo efectivamente esa especulación se ha producido, ¿no? Con terrenos militares. Muchas veces impidiendo algo como, por ejemplo, lo que planteaba Gabriel en esta última presentación, ¿no? Impidiendo que esos terrenos puedan desempeñar un papel positivo para las ciudades en las que se encuentran, porque frente a esas lógicas urbanas de regeneración, de mejora del espacio construido, se está primando la rentabilidad económica de todo ese suelo. Bueno, yo en concreto, el caso que voy a tratar es el caso de Valladolid. Había puesto aquí este pequeño planito de localización para el resto de ponentes que quizás no sepan dónde se ubica la ciudad, ¿no? Una ciudad de 300.000 habitantes en el noroeste de España, capital de Castilla y León, y una ciudad que ha tenido tradicionalmente una notable presencia de instalaciones militares. En la segunda mitad del siglo XIX, Valladolid era una ciudad con muchísimos conventos, con muchísimos monasterios que quedaron en buena medida desamortizados en aquel momento, y varios de ellos fueron ocupados por cuarteles, por instalaciones militares, ¿no? Traigo ahí un plano de época donde se localizan algunas de ellas con alguna imagen, ¿no? Ahí se pueden ver, por ejemplo, esos antiguos claustros conventuales convertidos en patio de armas. Una vez ya en el siglo XX, en la primera mitad, hay un pequeño cambio. Se siguen construyendo nuevas instalaciones en Valladolid, pero en este caso con esa condición, ¿no? De nuevas instalaciones que ya no se ubican en antiguos terrenos religiosos del centro histórico, sino que empiezan a buscar ya instalaciones periféricas, sobre todo en las principales vías de acceso a la ciudad. Ahí os pongo, por ejemplo, dos de los cuarteles más importantes que se crean en Valladolid en aquel momento: el cuartel Conde Ansúrez, en esta parte de aquí del sur de la ciudad, y el cuartel de San Quintín o de San Isidro, en esta zona de aquí del sureste. A partir de aquí, sobre todo ya entrando en la segunda mitad del siglo XX, a partir de 1950, 1960, comienzan los procesos de abandono y reconversión que están un poquito ahí resumidos en el caso de Valladolid en ese esquema que tenéis a la izquierda. En un primer momento, en esas décadas centrales del siglo XX, los años 50, 60, principios de los 70, ese proceso de abandono comienza con instalaciones obsoletas del centro histórico, ¿no? Esos antiguos conventos que se habían estado ocupando desde el siglo XIX empiezan a ser abandonados por los militares cuando ya están muchos de ellos prácticamente en ruinas y acaban muchos de ellos directamente en manos del ayuntamiento, que es el único que quiere hacerse cargo de ellos, ¿no? Ahí tenéis dos ejemplos. A partir de 1977, pongo ese año porque es el año en el que se crea el Ministerio de Defensa, estaba en ese contexto de transición a la democracia, esos procesos de abandono a partir de entonces empiezan a generalizarse sobre todas las instalaciones militares de la ciudad. Ya no solo se afecta a esas instalaciones más antiguas, obsoletas del centro histórico, sino que esos procesos de abandono y posterior reconversión empiezan también a afectar a esos grandes cuarteles periféricos que se habían construido en las primeras décadas del siglo XX. De hecho, en la actualidad, de todos esos terrenos militares que tenéis marcados ahí ese esquema, únicamente 2 de ellos siguen funcionando como tales, aunque ya con muy poca actividad, si hacemos excepción de 2 instalaciones muy singulares, que son el antiguo Palacio Real de Valladolid, que sigue estando ocupado por la Capitanía, lo que antes era la Capitanía General, hoy es la 4ª Subinspección General del Ejército, y la Academia de Caballería, que también es una instalación muy singular, ¿no? Creo que parece que solo hay 3 en España con esta condición. Una vez establecido este contexto un poco general, ¿no?, del proceso de abandono y posteriores procesos de reconversión, yo simplemente voy a tratar 3 de ellos, 3 que tienen características distintas, son un poco complementarios, pero de los que yo creo que se puede extraer la misma conclusión, ¿no? Y vuelvo un poco a lo que decía al principio y que detallaré un poquito más al final. El primer ejemplo que he elegido es el Hospital Militar. El Hospital Militar de Valladolid se acondicionó ya, como pone ahí, en 1842 sobre un antiguo convento. En el límite sur de lo que entonces era la ciudad, los militares ocuparon para ese uso sanitario un antiguo convento. Se mantuvo ese uso en ese edificio durante varias décadas hasta que en los años 20 se decidió derribar el convento original y construir un edificio ex novo manteniendo ese uso militar. La obra se desarrolló entre 1930 y 1933, que fue cuando se inauguró ese hospital. Pues bien, ese hospital se mantuvo en funcionamiento en ese nuevo edificio durante más de 60 años hasta que en 1994 el Ministerio de Defensa, que compartía en ese momento su gestión con el Ministerio de Sanidad, decidió unilateralmente cerrar este hospital, algo que no solo ocurrió en Valladolid, sino que también ocurrió con otros hospitales militares en otras ciudades españolas. En aquel momento, el Ministerio decidió que quería desprenderse de todas esas instalaciones. En el caso concreto de Valladolid, esto generaba un problema bastante importante para la ciudad, que en aquel momento no tenía muchas instalaciones sanitarias de este tipo. Pero el Ministerio de Defensa tuvo muy claro en aquel momento que lo que quería era rentabilizar económicamente aquella instalación. Esto generó un problema local, como digo, hubo muchas negociaciones en las que intervino tanto el propio ayuntamiento de la ciudad como también el gobierno regional, la Junta de Castilla y León. Finalmente, el hospital se cerró de todas las maneras en 1995, pero 2 años después, en el 97, se alcanzó un acuerdo. Un acuerdo que pasó, eso sí, porque el Ministerio de Defensa ingresase, como pone ahí, 2.200 millones de pesetas, más un solar residencial en un plan parcial de la ciudad, a cambio de ceder ese edificio, ese hospital, a la Junta de Castilla y León, que sí que consiguió un convenio temporal con lo que entonces era el Insalud para mantener el uso sanitario hasta que Castilla y León obtuviese las competencias sanitarias. Ese acuerdo se hizo efectivo en el año 98 y finalmente en 2003 se acabó prescindiendo de ese uso sanitario y hoy en día lo que era ese antiguo hospital militar es la sede administrativa de la Consejería de Sanidad de Castilla y León. Otro ejemplo que traigo es este de aquí, el Parque de Ingenieros y de la Comandancia de Obras junto con la barriada Esteban Infantes. Esto es una instalación que se crea posterior a la del Hospital Militar en los años 40-50 en la periferia sur de Valladolid, una instalación bastante amplia que integraba tanto ese Parque de Ingenieros y Comandancia de Obras como una pequeña barriada militar, pequeñas viviendas unifamiliares, no sé si más o menos las podéis ver aquí, y esta instalación empezó a abandonarse en los años 80, a inicios de los años 80. De hecho, el Ministerio en aquel momento derribó buena parte de los edificios que tenía este complejo. Ante ese fenómeno, el Plan General de la Ciudad, el primer Plan General de la Democracia, que se aprobó en el año 84, ya delimitó todo ese terreno dentro de un área de intervención para la que preveía fundamentalmente usos públicos, usos dotacionales. Sin embargo, la evolución posterior que tuvo esta zona, en el año 88 se abrió un centro comercial del Corte Inglés muy cerca, cambió, digamos, el contexto inmobiliario de esa parte de Valladolid. de tal forma que el Ministerio de Defensa quiso promover un cambio en el uso previsto de esos terrenos. Un cambio que se materializó en el año 89 con un convenio que se firmó entre el Ministerio y el Ayuntamiento, por lo que se decidió de redactar un PERI, ¿no? Ese instrumento que mencionaba también antes Gabriel, donde la edificabilidad lucrativa se incrementó hasta los 30.000 metros cuadrados, reservando, eso sí, una parte, 20.000 metros cuadrados en suelo, para esa intención inicial de dedicarlo a equipamientos públicos. Ese PERI se aprobó al año siguiente y durante la década posterior el Ministerio de Defensa fue sacando a subasta todos los solares de esa intervención al mismo tiempo que se hacían las obras de urbanización, con el resultado que tenéis ahí a la derecha, ¿no? Este gran parque está denominada Plaza del Ejército. Y un tercer ejemplo que os traigo, los cuarteles Conde Ansur, el General Monasterio, una instalación muy importante de la ciudad, también en la periferia sureste, de inicios del siglo XX, que se amplió en 1950 con un segundo cuartel de artillería y que ya se enajenó parte de sus terrenos en la década de los 70. Sin embargo, el cuartel siguió funcionando. El plan general asignó de nuevo, ante la posibilidad de un cese del uso militar, que eso se destinase a usos dotacionales, pero ocurrió algo muy parecido a lo anterior. En ese convenio del año 89 ya se acordó un incremento también aquí de la edificabilidad lucrativa, de la edificabilidad residencial. El Ministerio desmanteló a lo largo de los años 90 buena parte del cuartel, al mismo tiempo que ocurría lo mismo en una zona industrial colindante, en este lado de aquí, de este paseo. Esta es la zona militar y esta era una zona industrial. En un contexto, por lo tanto, de nuevo, de reconversión residencial de toda esa zona, el Ministerio se suma a esa ola. En el año 2000 el cierre de los cuarteles ya fue total y, como pone ahí, en el año 2003 hubo una subasta de todo el suelo militar con un precio de salida de 56 millones de euros que acabaron siendo 91 millones. En este caso, el Ministerio de Defensa ya ni siquiera se implicó en la redacción del PERI, sino que directamente subastó los terrenos. Cuando las promotoras que los adquirieron redactaron el PERI en el año 2007, al poco tiempo estalló la burbuja inmobiliaria, ¿no? Como todos conoceréis, y esos terrenos militares siguen hoy en día abandonados, ¿no? Con la pérdida de patrimonio militar que eso también implica. Y llegando ya a las conclusiones, ¿no? Y según comentaba al principio, a través de estos casos yo creo que se puede decir que el Ministerio de Defensa actuó de una manera imposible de distinguir de un operador privado. Priorizó la rentabilización económica de su patrimonio y actuó con una mentalidad especulativa, ¿no? Va sacando, va liberando los terrenos a medida que cree que el momento es más propicio para obtener ese máximo beneficio. Y al mismo tiempo el ayuntamiento, que es un agente necesario para ese proceso, le reconoció en ese papel. Asumió la negociación como procedimiento para desatascar todos esos procesos, aún incluso modificando las previsiones urbanísticas iniciales. Y sí que podemos ver aquí esta lógica del intercambio, ¿no? Te voy a dar edificabilidad lucrativa, pero bueno, vamos a cambio, como compensación, a mantener, aunque sea solo en parte, esa lógica de la dotación. Esto daría también para mucha conversación porque, claro, aquí a veces también está la cuestión de que el Ministerio de Defensa tiene una posición de fuerza respecto a los ayuntamientos, no solo por ser lo que es, ¿no? Por ser un ministerio, sino porque, por ejemplo, a veces sus informes favorables son imprescindibles para aprobar el planeamiento local. En el caso de Valladolid, la revisión más reciente del Plan General del año 2020 no se pudo aprobar definitivamente hasta que el Ministerio de Defensa dio el visto bueno a las previsiones urbanísticas sobre los terrenos de su propiedad. Y nada más. Esto era un poco lo que quería compartir con vosotros. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias a ti, Miguel. Muy bien. Menuda presentación. Me ha gustado mucho.
Gracias.
Entonces, ahora pasamos a unos colegas de la ciudad de Granada. Juan Luis Rivas Navarro, Belén Bravo Rodríguez y Juan Manuel Barrios Rozúa. Juan Luis, ¿estás aquí?
Sí, aquí estoy. No sé si me escucháis.
Sí, te escuchamos fuerte y claro.
Vale. Voy a ver si sé compartir pantalla.
Ok. Es la barra, ¿sabes? Central. Ah, sí, mira. Muy bien.
¿Estoy ya o no? Sí.
Sí, se ve, se ve.
Vale. ¿Se vería la presentación? ¿La veis todo? ¿Me escucháis?
No, vemos solamente la carpeta. Quizás está cargando, porque he visto que has hecho clic, pero aparece solamente la carpeta 00, textos, presentación.
A ver si ahora sí, ¿no?
Todavía no. Si no, intenta ponerla abajo, la carpeta. No sé cómo se dice en castellano, la línea que está arriba a la derecha.
¿Ahora tampoco?
No, sí, ahora tampoco. A ver, si quitas la carpeta del...
¿Quito la carpeta?
Sí. No, se te ve a ti, hostia. Quería decir...
Sí. ¿Y ahora tampoco? ¿Si hago esto tampoco?
No, te veo a ti.
Espera.
Sí.
Voy a dejar y ahora voy a abrir de otro modo. No sé. ¿Haciendo esto? Quizá.
A ver. Sí, ahí va.
¿Ahora ya sí?
Sí, se ve.
Vale. ¿Y ahora en modo pantalla completa también?
También, sí, exacto.
Vale, muy bien. Bueno, pues a ver si me da tiempo a explicaros lo que queremos plantear. Bueno, la presentación la voy a hacer yo en esta ocasión. El título de la ponencia es sístole y diástole del antiguo hospital militar en el barrio del Realejo de Granada y su conversión en la Escuela de Arquitectura, una relación simbiótica. El objetivo, de alguna forma, de la presentación... Un momento. Se queda parado esto. ¿Ahora?
Sí, va.
Ahora, de acuerdo. Está andando, ¿no? Vale. Bueno, pues aquí tenéis un índice un poco tanto de la ponencia como del capítulo que entregamos a Federico. Una introducción en la que hablamos de los objetivos, un poco de la metodología. Por otro lado, la conexión de la ponencia con la teoría urbanística que manejamos y que la línea de investigación que estamos siguiendo sobre el papel de los equipamientos colectivos en general en los procesos de regeneración urbana. Y luego contextualizaremos el caso de estudio, porque la idea es hacer una puesta en común de la línea del tiempo del edificio del Hospital Militar, que ahora es Escuela de Arquitectura en Granada, y del tejido urbano del Realejo en el cual se inserta. Luego explicaré brevemente los resultados de las diferentes metodologías y, por último, sacaremos una serie de conclusiones o líneas de investigación que se abren, sobre todo. Bueno, en general, tenemos nosotros la voluntad de incentivar la reflexión urbana de la rehabilitación arquitectónica en los procesos de regeneración, no solo de instalaciones militares, sino de procesos de recuperación de grandes recintos, ¿no? Y por eso planteamos este estudio de una relación simbiótica que entendemos entre el edificio y la ciudad. Las razones que identifican, digamos, que tenemos para hacer esta identificación está tanto en la historia del edificio como el papel que tiene el edificio dentro del espacio público del Campo del Príncipe, que es el centro espacial, por decirlo de algún modo, del Realejo, del barrio del Realejo, la frontalidad del edificio, la altura de sus plantas, la limpieza de la distribución interior, la jerarquía de huecos. El objetivo es aprender de este caso de estudio y ser útil para otras localizaciones, reivindicar la multiescalaridad en el urbanismo y la concepción de redes urbanas en la reflexión de la recuperación de patrimonio militar o de otros tipos de patrimonio y de edificaciones singulares, y específicamente localizar periodos que llamaríamos nosotros de sístole y de diástole en el edificio con el tejido urbano adyacente, periodos que llamaríamos activos o pasivos, constatando su interdependencia. Y, por otro lado, reflexionar en general acerca del papel urbano de las dotaciones o centros de actividad que se instalan como nuevas funciones en los edificios renovados. Se analiza este vivir juntos del edificio y del barrio, que ha llevado a una relación como de maridaje positivo actualmente, que incentiva las funciones urbanas, que rehabilita los espacios públicos fundamentales, que construye identidad barrial y que es una referencia para el patrimonio de la ciudad funcionalmente e incluso ambientalmente. Y las metodologías que ponemos en marcha pues son un estudio de fuentes documentales, el uso de entrevistas a informantes del barrio que nos cubren un montón de cosas, la verdad, un montón de situaciones a las que no llegamos con las fuentes documentales, análisis y representaciones cartográficas que nos permitan trascender de la escala arquitectónica en la que se suele instalar la recuperación edificatoria, y revisar esta fase histórica de esta simbiosis. ¿Conectamos con qué temas? Pues con los temas de la regeneración de áreas militares en desuso o los brownfields, obviamente, como todo el congreso en el que estamos. También con las redes dotacionales, con la idea de la apropiación del espacio, los asuntos relativos a la creación o la construcción de identidad, la memoria y también la turistificación. un poco como oposición o como negativo de esta memoria. También metodologías sociales que nos han permitido abordar a donde no llegamos a través de los métodos más disciplinares espaciales. Y por otro lado, pues bibliografía relativa específicamente al caso de estudio, muy estudiado históricamente, lo que es el propio edificio, la rehabilitación y también casos de rehabilitación arquitectónica. Algunas ideas así como fundamentales en las que nos insertamos. En general, entendemos que lo público ha de reivindicarse como una herramienta para promover la multifuncionalidad. Por otro lado, que necesitamos también que lo público, pero específicamente el espacio público, establezca o permita una experiencia de identidad local mediante mecanismos de apropiación que surjan o hagan surgir nuevas actividades en los entornos urbanos. Por otro lado, los tipos de actividades que sabemos que se producen en el espacio público, no todas son actividades necesarias o actividades incluso optativas, sino que se producen sinergias. Se producen actividades resultantes sociales que son casi más importantes a la postre que la propia actividad fundamental para la que estaba pensada el edificio o el bien edificado. Por otro lado, o por decir alguna más, la planificación en general no puede ser entendida la implementación urbana de la regeneración, de la rehabilitación edificatoria como una operación autónoma a la regeneración urbana, que es lo que venimos acostumbrándonos en nuestros contextos, ¿no? Y la concreción de la arquitectura depende de relaciones que podríamos denominar topológicas de la dotación con ese ámbito de la ciudad. Por tanto, es necesario acercar estas dos potentes dimensiones, ¿no? Y bueno, en este último diapositiva os muestro también cómo, en general, como sucede, por ejemplo, con el turismo urbano, algo que está ahora mismo golpeando nuestras ciudades centrales, que está integrado en el cuerpo de la ciudad de tal manera que la ciudad turística solo puede ser concebida como una superposición de otras muchas ciudades. El patrimonio también, el patrimonio incluido el militar, debe ser entendido como un recurso y este recurso debe mantener vínculos con los diversos usuarios que se dan en la propia ciudad, formando parte de todas esas ciudades convivientes. La ciudad del ocio, la ciudad del negocio, la ciudad del turismo, la ciudad del comercio. Y bueno, esto va digamos, a un entendimiento de un urbanismo mucho más flexible, más adaptativo, más resiliente al fin, ¿no? En el que se produzca realmente, como decía Joel, una utilización ética de las construcciones heredadas, ¿no? Para ponerlas al servicio de la demanda social. Bueno, esta es una fotografía aérea del centro de la ciudad de Granada, en el que veis la Alhambra y veis sobre todo el centro de la ciudad y el río Darro, ahora convertido en todo eje viario, hasta el río Genil, que es el principal río de la ciudad, y este sería el barrio del Realejo. Señalo en amarillo la posición del Campo del Príncipe y de la actual Escuela de Arquitectura aquí, ¿no? Entonces, muy brevemente, solamente asomaros a las tres metodologías a las tres metodologías que nosotros ponemos en marcha para poder abordar esta superposición del contexto histórico y evolución comparada del hospital militar y del barrio del Realejo. Por un lado, es la evolución del propio hospital, que como es militar empezó en 1865, y bueno, fue hospital militar hasta 1994. En ese periodo sufrió hasta 38 modificaciones o transformaciones, lo que ha sido, yo creo que un puntal importante para aumentar la potencialidad del edificio de cara a ser convertido en uso universitario posterior, ¿no? Bueno, son diferentes transformaciones que el edificio va sufriendo a lo largo del final del siglo XIX y todo el siglo XX, y en paralelo se va consolidando el barrio, que en su parte trasera, la parte del hospital militar, que aquí veis que no está completo, digamos, porque es un edificio mucho más fachada de lo que ahora vemos, que es un edificio más centrípeto, más volcado en sus patios interiores. Hacia atrás tenía una zona llamada Huertas de Belén, donde realmente había un ambiente muy de descomposición de la ciudad en aquella época y se consolida en los años 40 o 50. Empieza su consolidación, la trasera. Bueno, tenemos un edificio ahora, en el año 2015, Premio Nacional de Arquitectura, que se hizo un concurso internacional que ganó Víctor López Cotelo, cuyo, digamos, más alabado gesto fue la construcción del aula magna dentro del patio grande, el patio de la derecha o el patio sur, visto desde el plano, y esto que lo ha permitido convertirse hoy día casi en un edificio acogedor de un montón de actividades, de congresos y como una especie de centro de convenciones. Que es un poco, este es el patio más antiguo, pero esta intervención que venía a ser modélica es una intervención que se alarga entre el 2003 y el 2014, en realidad casi 12 años de peregrinaje de esta intervención en el barrio, que ahora veremos afectó muchísimo al tejido barrial.
Casi 10 minutos, ve.
Bueno, aquí enseñaros que vamos a hacer, digamos que hemos hecho el cruce de la periodificación edificatoria, que aparece aquí, que os he contado más o menos, y de la consolidación también del barrio. Y en ese sentido se ha construido este cronograma que ha producido, que ha permitido establecer unos periodos sistólicos y unos periodos diastólicos que podemos llamar positivos o de energía del edificio hacia el barrio y periodos sumideros o periodos en los cuales se ha producido un prejuicio de la ausencia de actividad en el edificio con respecto al barrio. ¿Cómo hemos constatado estas relaciones urbanas del edificio? Primero a través de esta cartografía de producción de sistemas urbanos o subsistemas, haciendo sofisticada la cartografía urbana y mostrando cómo es una herramienta potente para entender multiescalarmente la arquitectura. Y por otro lado, haciendo una serie de entrevistas a informantes del barrio, hasta 5 informantes que tienen mucha experiencia y muchos años de vivencia con el edificio y con el barrio, de tal manera que hemos podido caracterizar una serie de etapas y de constatar estos periodos sistólicos y diastólicos con comentarios como que, bueno, pues que los soldados tenían una presencia militar importante, una presencia en el barrio, que había una relación con todo lo que sucedía en este edificio un poco tenebroso, entre comillas, donde moría gente, sobre todo en las Navidades, un edificio donde había una planta para los soldados que ellos llamaban locos. Sin embargo, la vida del Realejo se producía en otras posiciones, como la Plaza del Realejo. Vemos también que se produce un decaimiento de la actividad militar en casi 15 años antes de que fuera a ser escuela de arquitectura, y vamos entendiendo cómo poco a poco el edificio, cuando surge en el año 95, la primera vez que pasa de Ministerio de Defensa a Educación, a Universidad de Granada, hay un periodo floreciente en el que el barrio tiene muchas expectativas, los estudiantes se alojan en este barrio, los comercios y los comerciantes, como los entrevistados, se alegran de esta posición universitaria en lugar de militar, y sin embargo luego aparece el vacío del año 2003 hasta el año 2015, en el que con una opacidad bastante importante por parte de la administración se produce un decaimiento importante del barrio que coincide con la crisis económica española y que coincide con una etapa de incertidumbre tremenda en la que mucha gente tiene que abandonar sus negocios. Luego ya estamos ahora mismo en una etapa de certidumbre, una etapa que ha sido un poco truncada ahora por la pandemia, pero todo el mundo confía en que volvamos a una normalidad y a un periodo de estabilización en el que ahora sí el edificio vuelve a ser un